Chapter 715. In the small palace by the lakeside. In the first room on the second floor, the windows were wide open, allowing the sunlight to pour in. Beside the large white bed, there were a few slender figures standing quietly. There was also a little boy with white hair who was no more than 12 or 13 years old sitting on the edge of the bed. His pair of wild eyes were staring intently at the bed. The few beauties beside him also had nervous expressions as they stared intently at the thin figure on the bed. Yin Nuoxing, who was leaning against the head of the bed, slowly opened his left eye and glanced at the people in the room. He glanced at Feng, Yishi, Ziyi, Kaixia, Lan Xin and Xiaobai, and finally fixed his eyes on Zian. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but sigh and send a voice transmission. I don't have long to live. This country, I will leave it to you in the future. Zian and the others were stunned. Then they all rolled their eyes and couldn't help but curse. To hell with the country. You are still in a mood to joke. Yin Nuoxing laughed and sent a voice transmission. I am just trying to liven up the atmosphere. Look at all of your serious faces. Seeing him laugh, everyone wanted to laugh along, but they couldn't squeeze out a smile. There was only incomparable solemnity on their pretty faces. On Yin Nuoxing's beautiful face, the right side of his face was once again occupied by the black runes, and they were still wriggling slowly, looking ferocious and terrifying. As if he knew what everyone was thinking, Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly and lowered his head to look at little Bing Er, who was sleeping peacefully beside his hand. His eyes were gentle. This mark of primal chaos had been hidden under his skin after he reconstructed his body. However, it had appeared once again yesterday, giving everyone a fright. Zai and the others ran out of his soul as if they were fleeing for their lives. The expansion of primal chaos was eroding that spiritual world. However, the area it occupied was extremely small. It was only at the space between the soul's eyebrows. Moreover, the seal could not seal it. There was no seal there at all. However, the demonic chi that was sealed in his heart was moving slightly. It seemed to be affected by the activity of primal chaos and wanted to break free. Yin Nuoxing closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he waved his hand, and the netherworld ruined sword appeared in his hand. He gently stroked the sword, looked up at Zian, and handed the sword to her. He smiled and sent a voice transmission. Battle King's platform, go. Uncle Yin and the others are waiting. According to the time, it should have started by now. If we lose because of me, then I will be a sinner. Zian was slightly taken aback. Her beautiful eyes stared intently at his left eye as her pearly white teeth gently bit her red lips. She gently nodded, took the nether void sword, and slowly lowered her head. Seeing this, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but smile. He stretched out his weak right hand and stroked her head. He thought for a moment, then smiled slyly and said, If we win, I will reward you. Looking up at Mei Mao, Zian saw that her haggard face was full of fatigue and felt a stab of pain in his heart. The sudden movement of the primal chaos and all his strength that was mysteriously sucked away made it difficult for him to even raise his hand. He wanted to stay and look after her, but there were too many people in the room, and to be honest, it wouldn't make a difference even if she wasn't there. Okay. Zian nodded, grabbed the netherworld ruined sword, and turned to leave. No one was worried that she would be devoured by the divine sword. Yishi had forcefully used the Ling Hong sword and was devoured by it, but the netherworld ruined sword had its own soul. How could it do something like devour Zian? Seeing Zian leave the room, Yin Nuoxing's face turned pale. He spat out a mouthful of golden red blood, and a bright golden red flower was stained on the white quilt. It was a poignant sight, and the few people around the bed were a little anxious. Feng, and Zi both covered his wrists and chest. When they checked his body, they frowned and asked, How did this happen? I feel that something is brewing in my body. This time, it seems like it has nothing to do with the primal chaos. It's just that the suppression of the divine body and soul of the primal chaos has weakened, and that's why the mark appeared. When the primal chaos turned into that dagger, it rarely moved. Yin Nuoxing sighed helplessly and raised his head slightly so that Lan Xin could wipe the blood off his neck. Something is brewing? Lon Xin asked with confusion. When Little White heard that, he turned around and crawled over. He put his hand on Yun Nuoxing's belly and closed his eyes to feel. The primal chaos god body, god class soul, 5 elements, and a god spirit blood pulse. With these conditions combined, your recovery power should be off the charts. Now, I can only feel that your body's energy and life force are draining away. Little White's white eyebrows frowned, and he quietly said, "That fits what you said about something brewing. The moment your body's energy recovers, it's taken away. It is a miracle that you are still alive." I have heard that many times. Yun Nuoxing gave a wry smile and shook her head. "You want me to die, don't you? That's normal." "No, I didn't mean that." Little White scratched his whiskers and sighed. "You have too many things. I can't tell what is going on, but you can use the Xian crystals to help you recover. At least you won't feel so bad." Yun Nuoxing thought about it, nodded, and said, "That's true." Feng, and Ziyi moved their jade-like hands away. Yun Nuoxing gasped lightly and took out his white palm from under the blanket. He flipped his palm and took out a fist-sized crystal that was bright gold and colorful. The light element holy grade Xian crystal. It is a treasure that Xian Yin left for me. It is a collection that I don't want to use. Yun Nuoxing gave a wry smile, but he had to use it no matter how much he didn't want to use it. If this continued, even if he didn't die, he would be disabled. Murmuring, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and squeezed the holy grade Xian crystal. A violent suction force came from his palm. That suction force rushed into the holy grade Xian crystal like a bandit, greedily sucking in the majestic energy inside. Kai Xia, who was on the side, saw this and gently walked over. She stretched out her 2 jade hands and placed them on Yun Nuoxing's palms. Bursts of golden light emerged. Her cherry lips slightly opened, and she softly spat out syllables that others could not understand. Even Yun Nuoxing was confused. However, when she whispered softly, he felt that the energy he absorbed was more pure, and the speed had increased a lot. Yun Nuoxing looked at Kai Xia in surprise. Since he had formed a contract with this light elf lady, he hadn't studied anything. At this moment, he was a little surprised to see what she had done. However, besides being surprised, he was also a little depressed, because when the majestic energy entered his body, it was hurriedly refined by the origin of the spirit receiving divine body. However, the energy, which was like a huge waterfall, disappeared before it reached his lower abdomen. It felt like something was devouring his energy. Moreover, the speed of devouring was very fast. The energy of the holy grade Xian crystal was completely devoured before it went deep into his body. There was even a phenomenon that the energy supply was cut off. No, it's not that the amount of Xian crystal isn't enough. Little Star is too weak now. He lacks soul power, and the origin of the spirit receiving divine body is also lacking. The speed of absorbing energy is too slow. Ziyi also sensed this scene. Her pretty face slightly darkened, and she hurriedly said, "Screech." A soft phoenix cry came from the room. Yun Nuoxing raised his head and saw that Feng Er's body was burning with a crimson flame. There was also a strange energy radiating from her body, which made her slender body look very holy. The Phoenix True Fire didn't release an extremely high temperature. The energy was suppressed, which made the room feel a little warm. Looking at Yun Nuoxing, Feng Er's Mei Mao felt a little heartache. After the light appeared, it quietly fell on his body, which made him a little stunned. After a while, he reacted. It was the blessing of the 4 divine beasts. At that time, he had already received it once. Roar! Beside him, Whitey also turned into a palm-sized, cute little tiger. It jumped from the bed onto Yun Nuoxing's head. Bursts of moonlight seemed to break through the shackles of time and space, falling on Yun Nuoxing's body. The 2 divine blessings seemed to drape him with a silver veil and a festive accessory. The 2 mysterious energies circulated in his body, causing Yun Nuoxing's miserable appearance to slow down slightly. The speed at which he refined the energy increased by a lot. Although he felt a little better, His face was still incomparably pale. While everyone was busy, no one noticed that Yin Nuoxing's bloodline was changing slightly. It was half golden and half red. At this moment, the red blood was like a dye, slowly being dyed with specks of gold. As for the little Bing heir beside the bed, there was an additional surge of vigorous star energy in her body. When the energy entered her body, it was as if it had fallen into a bottomless pit. There wasn't the slightest bit of reaction. On the other side, on the Battle King stage, everyone noticed that Yin Nuoxing wasn't present. Although the latter was only a freshman, due to the matter of the battle, he had gained quite a bit of fame in the Farlight Academy. Moreover, he was also ranked 4th on the Devil rankings. His absence caused everyone's faces to turn ugly. However, from the side of the Remote Sea Academy, extremely unpleasant voices rang out. Those words were extremely unpleasant to the ears, causing Yin Feng to go berserk. He almost killed those who spoke. Therefore, while the battle was still going on, the stage was also in an uproar. Those who didn't know would think that he was enraged because of Yin Nuoxing. However, Bing and Yin Yiting knew what Yin Nuoxing's status meant to them. Therefore, they were also exceptionally furious. The violent energy of the 3 heavenly deities frightened the few elders of the Remote Sea Academy to the point that they didn't dare to make sound. They could only hurriedly wave their hands to suppress the students. Their eyes flickered slightly. They didn't expect that the missing person would be so important to them. The original battle of the top 5 was changed to a battle of the top 10. However, the 4th ranker on the Devil rankings was missing. For a moment, Xueling Feng and the rest didn't dare to be careless. One person went up the stage and would only come down after admitting defeat. Since they were missing one person, they had to think of a countermeasure. If they made 1 or 2 small mistakes, it would really be difficult for them to win. The 10 people sent by the Remote Sea Academy weren't easy to deal with. For the first 3 battles, the Farlight Academy sent out the youth with 2 dark circles. The 10th ranker on the Devil rankings seemed to know that they were at a disadvantage because they were missing one person. When he fought, he perfectly demonstrated what it meant to fight with his life on the line. It was so bitter that it made everyone's face twitch. However, in the 4th battle, he was like a lamp that had run out of oil. As soon as the battle started, he was sent out of the stage by the person from the Remote Sea Academy. However, it was precisely this person who fought his way up from the 10th ranker. He defeated Chuan Mu, Lin Gong, and the others consecutively. After defeating 3 people in a row, Ding Mingyu took the lead and fought for a long time before she kicked that person off the stage. She didn't even have time to catch her breath. Another person from the Remote Sea Academy came up, and Ding Mingyu almost perished together with that person. Only then did both of them retreat with heavy injuries. Up until now, of the top 10 rankers on the Devil rankings, 5 of them had been eliminated, while the other side had also lost 5 people. Although the 2 sides seemed to be evenly matched, Xueling Feng's side was missing a person. They wouldn't be able to find a suitable replacement in a short period of time. It was now 4 against 5, and the 5 from the Remote Sea Academy weren't weak either. I should be able to deal with the strongest person on the other side, and then I should be able to take away half of the life of the other side. Xueling Feng's indifferent face was filled with an unquestionable sharpness. Zhao Wenyao and the others glanced at him and nodded slightly. It was as though he could do it as long as he opened his mouth. Strange, I've never heard of an expert of this level in the Remote Sea Academy. Since he could fight with Ding Mingyu to the point where both sides were injured, he shouldn't be a nobody in the Remote Sea Academy. Xian Yuan furrowed his brows. He and Ding Mingyu were old rivals. He knew that this seemingly indifferent girl had a berserk battle prowess under her alluring appearance. She had always suppressed him, but today they were both eliminated by another person. It should be a hidden character. Doesn't our academy have one as well? However, he doesn't seem to be here. Xueling Feng faintly curled his lips and said. At this point, the students of the Farlight Academy were somewhat enraged. Ding Mingyu was a goddess admired by countless people in the academy. Now that they saw her miserable appearance, they couldn't help but want to attack her together. If looks could kill, The people of the remote sea academy would have been shredded to death by the looks of their gazes. Following which, their gazes turned towards Shui Lingfeng, Xin Yuan, and the others, hoping that they could teach those guys a painful lesson. After putting their personal feelings aside, they started to worry again. They looked at the 4 people on the field and were somewhat irritated. They were also somewhat puzzled by Yun Nuoxing's disappearance. Fortunately, when Ding Mengyu and the others handed in their mission, they had mentioned that Yun Nuoxing was severely injured. Now that he was still not here, although they were somewhat unhappy, they didn't complain too much. After all, he had returned from a mission with serious injuries. They couldn't possibly expect him to risk his injuries to fight, right? However, they were still somewhat depressed. Looking at the lineup that was missing one person, they were somewhat annoyed that no one could fill the gap. I'll go take a look. Junior brother isn't the kind of person who doesn't keep his word. Ding Mingyu's pretty face was deathly pale. Her body was still stained with mottled blood. She looked extremely miserable, but still stubbornly stood firm. You should rest here. Since you said that he isn't the kind of person who doesn't keep his word, then something must have happened to him. We still have 4 people left, so there's an empty spot. Let's go all out and see if we can delay until he arrives. Shui Lingfeng shook his head and stopped Ding Mingyu, who was about to leave. The people of the remote sea academy seemed to have seen through their thoughts. The person that Shui Lingfeng had been wary of took a step forward and waved his hand at the latter with a faint smile. Shui Lingfeng was the only person who could catch his attention. The other side is going to speed up their pace. They are going to take advantage of the situation. Seeing this scene, Shui Lingfeng couldn't help but laugh bitterly. What could he do? If he didn't take action, Zhao Wenyao and the others wouldn't be able to stop them. At this moment, he could only take a step forward. Chapter 716. The sunlight cascaded down as Shui Lingfeng slowly walked out. When he stepped onto the platform, he swiped his palm across his chest and took off the silver-white spear pendant. Silvery light flashed, and not long after, the pendant transformed into a long silver spear that was about 3 meters long. His snow-white robes and silver spear, in addition to his casual disdain, exuded an aura as dazzling as the sun, causing people to involuntarily turn their gazes over. When the students of the Farlight Academy saw this silhouette, their faces were filled with unconcealable worship. It was as though this person could settle everything just by stepping out. Many of them had been looking up to him ever since they entered the academy. Even now, this was still the case. He was the unshakable number 1. It was already very surprising that the number 1 ranker on the Devil rankings would appear here. Now that they were able to see him in action, they were all incomparably excited. Not far away, the black-robed young man from the remote sea academy also calmly stared at Shui Lingfeng. He lowered his slightly raised palm as Shui Lingfeng walked out. With a smile, he asked, "It has been 2 years since we last met. I wonder what level have you reached now? At the very least, I won't lose out to you." Shui Lingfeng lightly waved his silver spear as he smiled. From the conversation between the two of them, it seemed that they were acquainted. "Now, you are also the number 1 ranker on the Devil rankings. However, I didn't waste my time either. It's time to settle the debt from 2 years ago." The black-robed young man smiled as he spread his arms. He then lazily continued, "However, I advise you guys to give up. With 1 less person, how can you fight against us? If we continue fighting, even if we have to exchange 1 person for another, we will still have 1 more person. However, you guys are truly capable. The 5 people you defeated were all dark horses among dark horses this year. They weren't much weaker compared to us back then. To think that you guys still managed to fight to a draw. Speaking of which, for that person who fled, it's not worth it for you guys to risk your lives for him. Everyone gave up because of fear. You guys aren't stupid either." The black-robed young man continued, not even giving Shui Lingfeng a chance to speak. But when they heard the last sentence, the countenances of Ding Mingyu and the others sank. This bastard really spoke too much nonsense. They really wanted to slap his mouth. "There's no need for you to worry about that." Shui Lingfeng smiled as a glint flashed across his eyes. "Why don't you give it a try? If you treat me like how I was 2 years ago, you will suffer a great loss." The black-robed young man smiled faintly. Then, he clenched his fist in the air, and a blood-red longsword slowly emerged from his palm. It was as though the sword was within his body. Holding the blood-red longsword in his hand, he shook it gently, and a terrifying storm exploded like a bomb. Immediately, the world was filled with the sound of metal clashing. In the terrifying storm of sword chi, one could even see sparks blossoming. It was as if there were invisible weapons clashing against each other, cutting the sky into countless areas. Clang! The long sword in his hand slammed into the ground. The sound of metal clashing was as loud as a bell, causing the students who heard it to feel as though their eardrums were about to explode. They could not help but be shocked. They quickly used their energy to protect their ears so that their eardrums would not be shattered when the battle started. He slowly brandished the blood-red sword in his hand. The sword shadows seemed to have condensed into a real entity. A terrifying sword chi soared into the sky. Rays of blood-red light condensed in the cyan storm. Shui Lingfeng's expression was dignified when he saw this. This guy was indeed much stronger than 2 years ago. Chaotic dance of the blood sword. The black-robed young man shouted. He let go of the blood-red sword and slammed his palm into the air. The blood-red storm formed by sword chi and the blood-red sword trembled. Sword cries resounded through the sky. Then, the blood-red storm suddenly bloomed, transforming into countless dancing sword shadows and sword chi. It covered the sky and covered the earth as it enveloped Shui Lingfeng. Wong! The blood-red storm exploded, and the ear-piercing sword cries blurred the vision of countless people. They could only squint their eyes and force themselves to look. Their eyes reflected the dancing sword shadows in the sky, and they were a little shocked. Then, they looked nervously at Shui Lingfeng. Could he withstand it? In the direction of the countless sword chi and sword shadows, Shui Lingfeng took a deep breath. A trace of seriousness flashed across his black eyes. As expected of the number one person in the academy, his growth was not any slower than his. He grabbed the silver spear with both of his hands and gently waved it. The silver light on the spear burst forth. He took a deep breath, and the silver spear slowly began to hum. A distant roar seemed to be coming from a very empty place. It was like a thunderous roar. After a moment, the roar descended, and a huge silver dragon suddenly rushed out from the silver spear. A terrifying power also spread out along with it. 10,000 dragons spear. Roar! Roar! Silver light crazily flickered. The world seemed to be covered by the blood-red sword light and the silver dragon light. The silver dragon was at least 1,000 feet long. Its tail suddenly separated from the tip of the spear. The huge dragon's eyes seemed to flash with a spiritual light, but it also seemed like an illusion. The powerful light made it difficult for people to see clearly. Roar! The silver dragon was completely stripped from the long spear. Soon after, its dragon scales opened up, and the enormous silver dragon suddenly roared at the sky. A frightening pressure descended from the sky like a real dragon's might, causing space itself to tremble slightly under this pressure. This force caused Ding Mingyu and the rest to be stunned. They hurriedly withdrew from the edge of the arena and landed in the spectator seats. At the same time, an enormous barrier stealthily appeared on the Battle King stage. The hand holding the long spear trembled slightly. A drop of sweat fell from Shui Lingfeng's forehead. A moment later, a low roar was emitted from his mouth. Then, he lifted the long spear and thrust it through the air. The huge silver dragon was at least 1,000 feet long. The sound waves from its roar caused the blood-red storm to turn sluggish. Then, its huge body shot forward like a long spear, after which it directly collided with the blood-red storm and the blood-red sword shadows that filled the sky. The huge Battle King stage was occupied by 2 brilliant colors. The extremely tough Battle King stage gently trembled at this moment. The space continuously churned like boiling water. Sounds of metal colliding and dragon roars continuously rang out. Every time that terrifying low roar sounded out, it would cause the space to violently churn. The entire arena was silent. Many stunned gazes carefully lifted their heads, after which they saw that the space in the sky was continuously twisting like a towel. Shueling Feng and the black-robed young man stared at the bright ball of light not far away. Both of their foreheads were slightly sweaty. This attack contained their full strength. They had no intention of exchanging pointers. That was meaningless to them. They could only use their strongest attacks to compete. Shueling Feng and the black-robed young man stared at the ball of light not far away. Suddenly, the sword hum and dragon roar that were transmitted from the sky completely disappeared. Replacing them were some strange noises. It was like the rumbling of someone having a stomachache or the sound of wood being crushed. The two clusters of energy seemed to have been compressed and kneaded by two large hands in front of the countless number of anxious gazes. Light was emitted at that spot, and even a small crack line was inadvertently formed in the space. As for the ball of light, it was constantly tumbling and becoming extremely unstable. It was as if there was something inside that was constantly attacking the ball of light. The frequency of the vibrations shocked both Lingfeng and Lingfeng. This was not the first or second time they had crossed swords, and such a situation had never occurred before. However, before they could think of anything, their expressions abruptly changed. They hurriedly raised their long spears and long swords in front of them. Then they used their remaining strength to agglomerate an energy barrier in front of them. Just as the two of them suddenly put up their defenses, a few terrifying energy light beams suddenly shot out from the ball of light in the sky. It looked like a constantly expanding ball that could not withstand the pressure and was leaking gas. As the space solidified, an extremely wild and violent energy immediately poured out. Rumble! The turbulent light cluster was finally unable to endure the expansion of the energy. It suddenly erupted. A glaring light scattered down from the sky. Rolling thunderbolts carried waves of dragon roars and sword cries as they resounded over the place. The shattered light cluster was accompanied by an incomparable energy storm as it poured down from the sky. The distorted space finally burst apart when this storm passed by. Countless pairs of eyes in the audience stared in horror at the rapidly exploding energy storm. Even though they were a great distance away and were separated by the energy barrier, they still felt that the energy storm would descend upon them in the next moment. The terrifying energy contained within it made them realize that if it was allowed to unbridled sweep over, there would not be many people left on the spacious Battle King stage, and the audience seats. Lingfeng was stunned as he stared at the energy storm that was sweeping over. He was just about to withdraw when the energy attack swept over like a torrent and directly smashed through his energy barrier. A muffled groan was emitted from his throat. He could not even hold his long silver spear properly. His hand loosened, and it turned back into a pendant that hung around his neck. The black-robed young man was also sent flying by the energy attack. Waves of muffled groans also sounded. A clear snap of a finger suddenly sounded amidst the raging wild and violent sound waves. This soft snap of a finger should have been instantly destroyed by the swaying sound waves of the storm. However, it clearly spread across the entire Battle King stage. Soon after, the enormous energy storm suddenly froze under the astonished gazes of the crowd. Subsequently, it disappeared within 2 breaths' time. Even the dust that filled the sky was suppressed. Upon seeing this, Yanfeng slowly lowered his hand and softly smiled as he muttered to himself, "How intense." After the energy storm scattered, everyone anxiously looked towards the Battle King stage. When they saw the densely packed cracks on the stage, the crowd could not help but bitterly sigh. These two fellows were actually able to destroy the Battle King stage. They were indeed worthy of being the number 1 on the devil ranking. They were indeed powerful. The two figures were still standing on the Battle King stage. However, the two of them were quite far away from each other. Most of the robes on their bodies were tattered, and they were panting softly. Clearly, the energy storm from earlier did not make them feel good. In the spectator stands, Xian Yuan, Zhao Wenyao, and the young man ranked sixth on the devil ranking flew down and arrived beside Shui Lingfeng. Their eyes flickered and their hearts involuntarily sank when they saw that the two of them were in a similar state. The destructive power of the two balls of energy from earlier was extremely powerful. Xian Yuan's heart violently pounded when he saw this. This was the first time he felt the disparity between the peak of the devil rank. He was very clear that if any of the two attacks from earlier landed on him, he would have died instantly. How is it? Xian Yuan shook his head and shook off those thoughts as he nervously asked. Shui Lingfeng was in the same miserable state as that person. Could it be? The corner of Shui Lingfeng's mouth twitched. His hand gently caressed his chest as he bitterly smiled and shook his head. If junior brother doesn't come, we'll probably be finished. Upon hearing his words, the hearts of Xian Yuan and the other two sunk. It was actually a draw. They did not expect that, even with Shui Lingfeng's strength, he would not be able to deal with the number one of the Remote Sea Academy. After all, we're old opponents. We've fought for so many years, but no one can say for sure who will win. 2 years ago, I was just one step ahead and won by a narrow margin. Who would have thought that in these 2 years, he would be able to reverse the situation? Shui Lingfeng straightforwardly laughed. Black lines appeared on the faces of Xian Yuan and the rest. They did not have the time to laugh now. Huff. As expected of the number one of the Distant Light Academy, you're still as troublesome as ever. Looks like this match is still the same. I'll look for you to spar another day. The black-robed young man looked at Shui Lingfeng and laughed heartily as he patted his somewhat depressed chest. All right. Shui Lingfeng laughed softly before retreating to the side. He glanced at Xian Yuan and sighed softly. Wenyao, you go up. That person on the other side is a little strange. Be careful. After he finished speaking, he discreetly glanced at the blue-robed figure standing at the back of the remaining 4 from the Remote Ocean Academy. He felt that something was amiss. Okay. Upon hearing this, Zhao Wenyao nodded his head. Just as he was about to take a step forward, the black-robed young man suddenly laughed. Oh, that's right. I forgot to tell you that my number 1 position is already in name only. I'm not the strongest in the Remote Sea Academy. The black-robed young man's chuckle caused the faces of Zhao Wenyao and the other two to turn gloomy. Chapter 717. Oh, Shui Lingfeng narrowed his eyes and inadvertently glanced at the blue-robed figure. Then he looked at the black-robed young man and felt slightly uneasy. Even someone as proud as the latter had said that he was inferior to them, so it was worth investigating. Didn't we run into the Divine Institute exchange this year? Our academy has prepared for 3 years for this year's exchange, and we recruited a few good seedlings last time. Moreover, we've even exhausted all our resources to nurture them. Now they've surpassed us. The black-robed young man transmitted his voice helplessly to Shui Lingfeng. He continued, I quite hate those guys, but they really are inferior to me. I can't get back at them, so what can I do? I'm in despair as well. Shui Lingfeng frowned when he heard that. The black-robed young man's strength was similar to his. Didn't that mean that he was inferior to those people as well? Ahem, as an old rival and half a friend, let me remind you to persuade them not to fight head-on. Those people are all vicious and merciless. Every move they make is fatal. Even the students of the Remote Ocean Academy have lost more than 10 students to them. The black-robed young man transmitted his voice again. Shui Lingfeng frowned. He looked at Zhao Wenyao, who was about to enter the arena. He hesitated for a moment before calling out to him. Then he told Xian Yuan and the others about what he had just heard. He had known the black-robed young man for a few years and got along quite well. They occasionally fought and drank together, so he probably wouldn't lie to him about something like that. However, they weren't in the same academy, so they didn't have the chance to get close. When Zhao Wenyao and the others heard this news, their expressions froze. They looked at each other. Zhao Wenyao also clenched his teeth, a thoughtful look flashing across his face. Tisk. After a while, he smacked his lips and raised his head. He took a deep breath and said, The Remote Ocean Academy has already come to our doorstep. With the pride of our Yuanguang Academy, how can we just sit back and watch? No matter how strong they are, I'll break their teeth, even if I have to risk my life. Shui Lingfeng and the others fell silent when they saw the determination on Zhao Wenyao's face. After a while, Xin Yuan also took a deep breath and said viciously, "Let's do it." Looking at Shui Lingfeng and the others from afar, the black-robed youth let out a long sigh and turned around to walk back. When he passed by the remaining 4 from the remote Ocean Academy, the blue-robed youth slowly raised his head, revealing a pale face. His eyes were empty and lifeless. There were no pupils, only the whites of his eyes. He looked like a dead person. Trash. The blue-robed young man didn't even look at the black-robed young man when he passed by him. The black-robed young man stiffened, then he slowly turned around and looked at the blue-robed young man. And sneered, he said, "If you want to try, I don't mind dragging you to die with me." A piece of trash that was picked up by someone. You think you're so great, just because you've tasted a little sweetness. I'll remember your name. One day, I'll repay you 1,000 times over. The black-robed young man coldly said. That stern tone caused the other 3 to frown slightly. However, they did not say anything. He was also extremely powerful. If they really forced him to take that step, he would still be able to make them pay a terrible price. Trash is ultimately trash. You've used the Academy's resources to occupy the so-called #1 spot, but you haven't achieved anything. The blue-robed young man didn't even turn around. He looked to the front and said in an indifferent voice. His tone didn't even seem like he was talking to a person. It was as if he was talking to a piece of trash. The black-robed young man was so angry that he laughed instead. My abilities were all cultivated by myself. The resources I obtained were all obtained by myself. No matter how useless I am, I'm still 10,000 times better than a vampire like you. A cheap existence like you will only be mercilessly abandoned once you lose your value. After speaking, he felt rather irritated. With a cold snort, he leapt off the Battle King stage and landed in the remote Ocean Academy's group. The other 3 frowned, but didn't say anything. They turned their heads and glanced at the blue-robed young man. When they saw the indifferent smile on his face, they couldn't help but tremble. This lunatic. Something bad was about to happen when he showed such an expression on the tall platform. The middle-aged man in blue robes looked at Yin Feng with a grin as he said, "Haha, looks like your 4th-ranked little fellow is going to be absent. We've really taken advantage of them this time. Those 4 little fellows are extremely arrogant in the remote Ocean Academy. Even #1 little fellow has to give them some face. Originally, we wanted to use the Farlight Academy to grind them down a little." Yin Feng smiled faintly and said, "Sai, those little fellows are arrogant and unruly. They won't even listen to us. There's nothing we can do if they don't come. This is just a warm-up before the Divine Institute exchange. Winning or losing doesn't matter. It's just a mutual exchange. However, if Dean sure has a need, I can find someone who will definitely not disappoint him." The middle-aged man before them was actually the dean of the remote Ocean Academy. His name was Shi Yuan, and anyone who could become the dean of the remote Ocean Academy was an extremely powerful figure in Xiaoguang City. However, the dean of the Farlight Academy had always been a hands-off boss. Many matters were handled by Yin Feng and the other 2. Moreover, they did indeed have the qualifications to do so. They belonged to the 9 sacred halls, and their strength was similar to the middle-aged man's. To put it bluntly, the 2 of them were on equal footing. "Oh, does your academy have such a well-hidden character?" Ishihara's face was full of smiles, but he snorted softly in his heart. Those 4 people were the ones with the best talent that they had discovered over the years. They had practically poured all their resources into nurturing them. How could they be defeated by any one of them? Yin Feng continued to smile faintly. However, his smile was slightly mysterious this time. Beside him, Bing and Yin Yiting frowned slightly. They seemed to have sensed something as they turned their gazes in a certain direction. Shi Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw their actions. Soon after, he calmly turned his gaze away as well. In the arena, Zhao Wenyao had already taken a few steps forward. However, before he reached the middle, he suddenly stopped. He was stunned for a moment, before he looked towards the eastern sky with a puzzled expression. At the edge of the sky, a purplish-black light was rushing over, accompanied by a swift and fierce aura. Although it was not considered sensational, it still attracted the gazes of countless people. Swish! A wind-splitting sound that contained a destructive force suddenly rang out in the sky. It was like a long arrow piercing through the air. Soon after, a purplish-black ray of light landed on the Battle King stage under the attention of countless gazes. Even the hard ground was shaken into powder, transforming into a wave of dust that rose and covered a small area. Who is it? The person from the Serene Sea Academy, who had stepped forward, also stopped walking. He looked at the cloud of dust and could not help but coldly shout, "Is it Junior?" Ding Mingyu and the rest stared intently at the area covered by dust. There was a trace of hope on their pretty faces. The gazes of Lin Sheng, Jun Luo Yi, Chuan Mu, and the rest turned slightly serious when they heard Ding Mingyu's voice that was filled with hope. They stared intently at the area. Under the gazes of countless people, the dust was stirred up by a gentle breeze, and the sound of light footsteps could be heard. In this silent square, the sound of the footsteps was gentle, clear, and stirred people's hearts. Thud, thud, the soft footsteps gradually became louder and louder. A slender figure appeared in front of everyone's gazes. Long, silk-like dark purple hair, an exquisite face, and an elegant and mysterious temperament. A cool purple shirt and pants clung to her body, vividly accentuating the perfect curves of her delicate body. Her slender legs were exposed to the air. Her snow-like skin caused many people's mouths to dry up. Coupled with the spacious black windbreaker, she appeared even more heroic. The young girl held a 2-meter-long, purplish-black greatsword in her hand. The greatsword's enormous size made the young girl appear even more petite and slender. Although it did not seem to match, there was a different kind of beauty within it. The person who had arrived was naturally Xian. She had changed into a rarely seen battle attire, and even wore a Yun Nuashing windbreaker. Compared to her original elegant and refined appearance, this attire had an additional wild and heroic aura. The originally noisy surroundings of the Battle Monarch platform suddenly froze at this moment. Regardless of whether it was the students of the Farlight Academy or the remote Ocean Academy, an extremely strong sense of amazement flashed through their eyes. Many people could not help but swallow their saliva. Even Ding Mingyu and the rest could not help but stare in a daze. Even though she was also a girl, she felt a little envious of that elegant demeanor. "What are you looking at?" The first to react was Yi Qinglian. She turned her head and saw Lin Sheng's eyes staring straight at her. She could not help but smile and ask. A somewhat dangerous smile appeared on her exquisite porcelain face as her jade-like hand gently rested on his shoulder. Lin Sheng's body trembled as he came back to his senses. Seeing Yi Qinglian's smiling appearance, he could not help but let out a dry laugh. Her voice sounded quite gentle, but it made him sweat a little. "Cough. It's nothing. I'm just admiring it. My Qinglian is still better looking." Lin Sheng could not help but smile. He gently held Yi Qinglian's small hand with one hand and scratched her little nose with the other. Sweet talker. Yi Qinglian did not comment on these flattering words. Xian's temperament and appearance were not inferior to hers. In fact, she was even better. Why is it her? Moments later, Ding Mingyu and the rest also came back to their senses. When they saw that the person who came was not Yun Nuashing, but Xian, who stuck to him 24/7 like a little shadow, they could not help but be stunned. Who is she? Shueling Feng could not help but take a few more glances at Xian before asking. He had seen her once that day, but did not know who she was. He only felt that she should be related to Yun Nuashing, Little Junior's girlfriend. She's always by his side. If you don't pay attention, you basically won't notice her existence, Ding Mingyu said softly. Hearing this, Shueling Feng smiled bitterly. He wanted to ask about combat strength. Don't worry, they've already made their move. It's impossible for them to lose. Ding Mingyu seemed to have guessed what he wanted to ask and smiled faintly. This made Shueling Feng's expression even more strange. And she said, "Wasn't there only one person?" How baffling, woman, has the Far Light Academy fallen to such a state? Little girl, swords have no eyes on the battle stage. I don't want to scratch your little face. You'd better leave the stage. The person from the remote Ocean Academy was also stunned for a moment because of Xian's appearance and temperament. However, after a moment, he still sneered. Xian's amethyst-like eyes glanced at that person, but she did not say anything. She held the nether void sword in her lily-white hand and stabbed it into the floor of the Battle Monarch platform. The clear sound of the sword piercing through the floor stunned everyone. Lin Sheng and Ding Mingyu clearly recognized this divine sword. They could not help but sweat. They had just seen the might of this divine sword the other day. Now, Xian was using it to deal with some small fries. However, seeing the situation, Ding Mingyu and the rest had some guesses. It seemed that Yin Nuoxing had something to do, which was why she had entrusted the divine sword to Xian and let her fight on her behalf. Devil ranking 36th, Xian Xian. Please enlighten me. Xian's voice was like a jade finger gently tapping on crystal. It slowly drifted across the battle stage. That gentle voice caused many people to close their eyes. They were so comfortable that they couldn't help but roll their eyes. It was as if just listening to her voice was a kind of enjoyment. Devil ranking 36th? Haha. Even the third on the devil ranking was defeated by those trash. What's the use of the 36th? In the remote Ocean Academy, the blue-robed youth suddenly burst into laughter. His voice was not concealed at all. As soon as it spread out, many people frowned. The people from the Far Light Academy stared at him with unkind expressions. Even the black-robed youth who had just participated in the battle had a terrifying look in his eyes. The other students from the remote Ocean Academy couldn't help but step forward to persuade him. After all, they were in someone else's territory. If there was an internal conflict, they would be laughed at. On the battle stage, the black-robed youth looked at Xian, who was standing less than 10 meters away. He pondered for a moment, then said, I won't show mercy in battle. I don't have a tender heart for the fairer sex. If you insist, I won't say anything else. Xian's brows slightly arched. However, they relaxed a moment later. She cupped her fists and said, Please. The black-clothed young man's expression became extremely gloomy after hearing this single word. He let out a cold cry and stomped his foot on the ground. Immediately, demonic chi that contained a majestic aura soared into the sky. The frightening demonic chi ripple transformed into a pressure that descended from the sky. There was even a different scent within the demonic chi demigod rank. Yin Feng glanced at the black-robed youth. He turned his head and looked at Dean Sher with a smile that was not a smile. He softly said, Dean Sher is good at teaching. This old man is ashamed of his inferiority. Haha, it's those little fellows who are talented. It has nothing to do with this old man. Hearing this, the middle-aged man chuckled and shook his head. There seemed to be a faint complacency in his expression. On the battle stage, Zhao Wenyao was somewhat confused about the situation. He turned his head and looked at Xue Lingfeng and the rest. When he saw Ding Mingyu and Xue Lingfeng nod at him, he also nodded. He looked at the beautiful figure nearby and softly said, Be careful. After his words sounded, he did not care whether Xian had heard him. He turned around and walked to the edge of the battle stage. When the black-robed youth saw Zhao Wenyao turn around and leave, he looked at Xian in astonishment. He involuntarily licked his lips and sneered. Looks like you are a little strange. However, that's all there is to it. The Far Light Academy is only SOSO. In that case, I will finish you off first before looking for the 4th rank coward. Xian narrowed her eyes. An extremely cold chill flashed across her clear Mei Mao eyes, causing the surrounding temperature to drop. She stared at the black-robed youth who was slowly walking over. Her lily-white hand slowly grabbed the nether void sword that was stabbed into the ground and pulled it out from the ground. Soon after, everyone saw a nearly solid 5-colored energy explode out from her slender body like a hurricane. It instantly swept across the entire battle stage. The majesty of that energy was even more terrifying than the black-robed youth's. She is also at the demigod rank. That energy, Miss Xian's, is the energy of the 5 elements. Her true cultivation realm should be around the 5th revolution of the 7 seals. Could it be that her medium is a crystal? Yinfeng was also taken aback. The unruly smile on his face immediately disappeared. He looked at Xian with a grave expression and couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air in his heart. Miss Xian's talent was not inferior to the godchild. When she first entered, she was only at the 3rd seal of the devil rank. In less than 4 months, she had already reached the 7th seal of the devil rank. Moreover, her energy medium was a crystal, which contained several tens of times more energy than a solid. It would often cause people to mistake her cultivation realm. Countless students from the Far Light Academy widened their eyes. They couldn't help but feel their hearts palpitate. That energy and elemental storm was nearly solid. Who would have thought that a new student ranked 36th on the devil rankings would actually possess such astonishing strength? Ding Mingyu and the rest were also dumbfounded. They knew that Yin Nuoxing was already abnormal enough. They didn't expect that there would be a greater abnormality here. Moreover, just from the surface, it seemed that this abnormality was even more abnormal than the former. Xian turned a deaf ear to the countless gazes. She only stared at the black-robed youth who was similarly shocked. Her red lips were tightly pursed. Then, she slowly raised her jade-like hand and raised the Netherruin sword. A crisp sword hum, accompanied by a terrifying destructive force, slowly reverberated across the horizon. Xian pondered for a moment. Mei Mao glanced at the 3 people beside her. She thought about the words that Yin Nuoxing had said to Yao Hua, Jining, and the others. After a brief moment, her red lips parted and her cold voice slowly rang out. Actually, all of you can come at me together. As her voice faded, the entire area fell silent. Countless people widened their eyes in astonishment. Even those from the remote sea academy had their eyes wide open. However, before the 4 of them could say a word, that purplish-black greatsword had already drawn a crescent-shaped mark. Boundless sword chi that was mixed with the power of destruction instantly soared into the sky. Chapter 7:18. The majestic sword chi was accompanied by a clear sword chime. It was like a perfect crescent moon descending from the sky. The destructive sword chi caused the surrounding space to shatter. The originally silent scene became deathly silent at this moment. The eyes of the students from the 2 academies were wide open as unconcealable shock surfaced on their faces. This attack, that surging destructive force, this young lady with an extremely outstanding demeanor and appearance, was she really only at the demigod level? Why was she only ranked 36th on the devil rankings, unknown to the public? Compared to the deathly silent scene, Lin Sheng, Ding Mingyu, and the rest were extremely calm. They had already seen something even more terrifying that day. As for Xue Lingfeng and the rest, their expressions were exceptionally fascinating. Before today, they had never even heard of Xianxian's name. However, the sword strike today caused their jaws to drop. If it wasn't for Ding Mingyu saying that there was no problem, he would have gone up to persuade her. After all, on the surface, she was only ranked 36th on the devil rankings. Even if she had a certain amount of fame among the new students, she was the type of person who didn't reveal her talent. She was like a hermit in the academy with Yin Nuoxing. No one would have thought that the girl who seemed to have been forgotten would actually be hiding such a terrifying strength. This couple is a little abnormal. Chuan Mu wiped his forehead and couldn't help but bitterly smile. These 2 were too good at hiding their strength. They were about to become hermits. Weren't they afraid of suffocating to death? Ding Mingyu and the rest coughed lightly and nodded. They also felt their hearts palpitating. There are no faint fluctuations of divinity at the demigod level. Even if that energy isn't pure devil chi, I believe that she is still at the demigod level. Moreover, she's a new student, so the possibility of her being at the demigod level is higher. If that's the case, Xue Lingfeng softly muttered. After that, his expression changed. Even Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu and the rest who were listening by the side had a drastic change in expression. Shui Ling Feng bitterly smiled. If that's the case, it makes sense why she would erupt with an aura close to the demigod level. Chuan Mu and the rest were somewhat speechless. They looked at each other and bitterly smiled. The structure of an energy carrier was a gap that was difficult to cross between a solid and a crystal. Once crossed, the energy would undergo a qualitative change. That was a difference of tens of times. The silence in the audience seats continued for a few seconds before it was finally broken by an excited shriek. Soon after, numerous cheers resounded throughout the place. Joy erupted from the eyes of countless Far-Light Academy students. They were all in a state where they did not know what was going on. All they needed to know was that Xian's aura was even stronger than that black-clothed young man. You want to fight for? Arrogant. Under countless gazes, the black-clothed youth's expression returned to normal. He immediately sneered. Although he couldn't figure out how Xian could erupt with an aura that was even stronger than his, the fact was that she hadn't awakened her divinity. Even if she had a strange giant sword, she wasn't the only one who had a divine weapon. Xian didn't comment on his sneer. She tightly gripped the Nether Void sword. Even if Yun Nuoxing was in a weakened state and the Nether Void sword had lost a lot of energy, even if she couldn't perfectly use the Nether Void sword's energy, just this little bit of energy was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Raising the Nether Void sword with both hands, Xian lightly shouted and leaped into the air. In the next second, a cold purple-black moonlight streaked across the sky. The entire world seemed to darken at this moment. The purple-black moonlight left the giant sword and landed on the Battle Monarch platform. Then it suddenly shot out. The enormous purple-black sword light was like a crescent moon. It carried an unparalleled destructive force as it streaked across the Battle Monarch platform at an astonishing speed. It left a terrifying crack in the ground as it charged toward the black-clothed youth with a roar. The black-clothed young man's face paled when he saw the sword chi that was like a ferocious beast charging over. The piercing pain that came from his soul made him extremely shocked. A feeling of death suddenly surged in his heart, as if the scythe of the god of death was placed on his neck. Wherever the sword light passed, the Battle Monarch platform was torn apart inch by inch. The dazzling sword light exuded a sharp aura of death. Even the Battle Monarch platform was trembling, unable to withstand the tyrannical power of the Nether Void sword. The black-clothed young man's eyes reflected the sword light. His expression turned from dull to solemn, then to extremely ferocious, and finally settled on fear. That great aura had not really descended on him, but it had already caused his state of mind to waver. "What are you doing? Do you want to die?" While the black-clothed young man's eyes were filled with shock, three figures suddenly appeared beside him. They were the remaining 3 people from the Serene Ocean Academy. Even the blue-robed young man had stepped forward. His expression was extremely solemn, and there was even a trace of fanaticism in his expression. The other 2 could not help but roar when they saw that the former had been shocked to the point of being stunned. This roar contained a spiritual impact, causing the black-clothed youth's body to tremble violently. His shaken expression slowly returned to normal. When he saw that the other 3 were standing beside him, a cold glint surged in his eyes. He suddenly clenched his hand, and a serene blue mirror suddenly appeared. The serene blue light continued to spread like ripples. After the mirror appeared, the turbulent energy in the area also froze slightly. The other 3 looked at each other, and the blue-robed youth curled his lips. Although he was rather displeased that he had been forced to join forces, he did not have much choice. The seemingly casual attack of the young lady had caused him to feel fear from the bottom of his heart. The energy within the bodies of the 3 erupted without reservation at this moment. For energy pillars soared into the sky. Based on their auras, the 4 of them had actually reached the demigod level. The 3 of them flipped their hands, and a fan and a long spear appeared one after another. The blue-robed youth held a fiery red 4-legged cauldron, from which surging scarlet red energy soared into the sky. 4 high-grade, rank 7 weapons. Dinshur is really willing to part with them. Yin Feng's face could not help but tremble when he saw the weapons that the four of them had taken out. He looked at Shi Yuan, wanting to see what he could say. These are the rewards that the four of you have received after completing a mission. They can be considered extremely precious divine weapons in my Serene Ocean Academy. Shi Yuan's large palm gently rubbed the armrest of his chair, and he smiled faintly. He inadvertently glanced at the purplish-black crescent moon on the battlefield, and a grave expression surfaced in his eyes. Yin Feng smiled faintly, trying to rely on numbers to block it. Unfortunately, the huge sword was not a divine weapon, but a genuine divine weapon. Even if it was in a damaged state, it would not be a problem for Yun Nuoshing to deal with a high-rank god. Buzz! The light from the four divine weapons intertwined to form a rain of light. The four of them revealed ferocious expressions as they tightly gripped the divine weapons in their hands. Monstrous energy poured out from their bodies like a waterfall. Subsequently, the four divine weapons let out a soft cry, and four terrifying energy pillars intertwined. They carried monstrous energy and directly collided with the sword aura that was rushing over like a meteor. Boom! The moment they collided, the five energy pillars carried an earth-shattering aura, and they erupted without holding back. It was like a huge energy storm had swept out. The cries of swords, the ringing of bells, and various other strange noises merged together. The energy that poured down caused the energy barrier of the Battle King stage to flicker violently. Boom! It was as if two meteors had exploded from the collision. A terrifying sound suddenly rang out from the dazzling sea of light, causing the hearts of countless people to tremble violently. Countless people forcefully opened their eyes and stared intently at the interior of the energy barrier, even though they were about to be blinded. The moment countless gazes gathered, a purplish-black crescent moon broke through the dazzling light cluster, mercilessly shattering the remnant energy of the four divine weapons. Subsequently, it continued to fly towards the four of them with unshakable energy. Shock flashed across the eyes of the blue-robed young man and the other three. The power of the opponent's sword aura was not within their expectations. Retreat! The four of them cried out. They practically stomped on the ground at the same time, and their figures rapidly retreated. At the same time, the four divine weapons collided together, forming an energy barrier that stood in front of them. However, this energy barrier was extremely dim, and it did not have much energy left. The moment the energy barrier was erected, the purplish-black sword aura was like a furious dragon. It charged head-on into the barrier, and the former was almost instantly shattered by the sword aura. It shattered into specks of light that filled the sky. Subsequently, it suddenly caught up with the four shocked people. Stop! Dinshur also discovered the situation at this moment. His expression changed slightly, and his body suddenly trembled. At the same time, a stern cry rang out across the entire Battle King stage. Just as he was about to make a move, the sword light carried a force as heavy as a mountain as it heavily slammed into the four people who were retreating. Ugh! The four of them rapidly flew backwards, and a heart-wrenching pain came from their bodies. It was as if all the bones in their bodies had been broken, and they vomited mouthfuls of blood. In the end, they shot out of the arena like arrows, and their heads smashed into the wall. They vomited another mouthful of blood, and their faces were deathly pale. Among the four of them, only the blue-robed young man barely managed to stop himself at the edge of the arena. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes were filled with shock and fear. Previously, he had clearly sensed the scent of death. If the sword aura had exerted a little more force, the four of them would have been directly melted by the energy within the sword aura. The purplish-black sword aura dissipated after colliding with the four of them, and the energy in the surroundings returned to normal. A large area of the Battle King stage had collapsed, and cracks as thick as thighs radiated outwards like spiderwebs. They covered the entire Battle King stage, and there was not an inch of undamaged land. This, the sword aura just now, was extremely fast, and it was as fast as a flash of light. By the time they came back to their senses, they had already seen 5 streams of energy colliding. They did not see what had happened, but when they saw the destroyed Battle King stage, a series of gasps rang out from the spectator stands. However, when they saw the 4 from the remote Ocean Academy vomiting blood due to their injuries, the students from the Farlight Academy also knew what had happened. Clap, clap. After a moment of silence, what followed was a series of crisp clapping sounds. Then, as if a chain reaction had started, thunderous applause, accompanied by earth-shattering cheers, rang out continuously from the spectator stands. At the edge of the Battle King stage, Xian had already pressed down the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he was slightly taken aback by the sudden applause and cheers. Mei Mao raised her head and looked in the direction of Ding Mingyu and the others. At this moment, they were smiling faintly, and their jade-like hands were gracefully clapping. It seemed like they were the ones who started clapping first. Xian also smiled faintly. Just as she was about to leave, a sense of danger suddenly surged in her heart. Almost reflexively, she raised the Netherworld Ruin Sword and swung it behind her. Clang! The sudden buzzing sound caused the cheers in the arena to freeze. Soon after, they saw a slender figure fly out and land on the ground with a clang. Everyone looked over in bewilderment, only to discover that it was a long spear. Moreover, it was the same long spear that the 4 people had used earlier. Slightly stunned for a moment, Xian's long, shapely eyebrows furrowed slightly. Just as she turned her gaze to the edge of the arena, a flower suddenly appeared in front of her. A fan made of green feathers suddenly appeared in front of her. The soft feathers had a metallic luster. Mei Mao's eyes reflected the green feather fan that was heading straight for her throat. Xian was also shocked. Her jade-like hand gripped the Netherworld Ruin Sword and slashed it forward with lightning speed. Bastard! Despicable! That bastard! In the spectator stands, when everyone saw that the blue-robed youth with his face covered in blood was actually about to attack with several divine artifacts in hand, they immediately went into an uproar. Waves of angry curses rang out. Not far away, Zhao Wenyao and Xin Yuan were also shocked. They didn't have the time to curse as their figures shot out like lightning. However, the distance was simply too close, and they couldn't make it in time. They could only watch in shock and anger as the green feather fan approached her slender neck. Chapter 719. The green feather fan cut through the air and pierced towards the elegant neck. The strong wind from the fan had even cut open the delicate skin, causing tiny bloody scars to appear on the skin. Countless people watched this scene in shock. Ding Mingyu and the rest could no longer care about their serious injuries as they struggled to jump off the spectator stands. On the other side of the tall platform, the Yin Feng trio, who were suppressing Shi Yuan, were both shocked and furious when they saw this scene. Yin Yiting's delicate figure also trembled. In an instant, she charged to the center of the Battle King platform. Before she arrived, her vast and mighty aura had already descended upon the blue-robed young man like the wrath of a god. Clang! However, just as everyone was trying to rescue him, a metallic sound suddenly resounded. Dazzling blood splattered in the air. It was a soul-stirring sight. Following that, a severed arm that was holding onto a fan appeared. The intense pain from her throat caused Xian and Mei Mao to dim. Her vision turned black for a moment as a mouthful of blood involuntarily spurted out from her small mouth. Fear and fury surged in Mei Mao's heart. She forcefully endured the intense pain from her neck as her hand that was holding the Netherworld Ruins sword twisted at a strange angle. Monstrous energy once again surged out from the giant sword. The blue-robed young man looked at his broken right hand in shock. He felt his body solidify, after which he looked at the enormous sword in front of him, which was accompanied by a majestic, destructive force. Waves of death intent rose in his heart. Stop! Just as the Netherworld Ruin sword was about to cut the blue-robed young man into two, a shout rang out once again. Compared to the previous voice, there was an additional trace of fury in this voice. At the same time, a terrifying pressure spread, causing the space that had been frozen by Yin Yu Ting's pressure to suddenly shatter. The blue-robed young man regained his freedom at this moment. The blue-robed young man did not hesitate at all. He crushed a talisman in his hand as his body shot out without any hesitation. However, in that short period of time, it was practically impossible to dodge. The Netherworld Ruins sword descended from the sky with terrifying power. Even though he reacted quickly, the sword still landed on his right shoulder, nearly cleaving him in half. The intense pain from his shoulder caused the blue-robed young man's vision to turn black as he spat out another mouthful of blood. He looked at his right shoulder that had been torn to shreds, with only a bit of skin remaining. He shot a venomous look at Xian as he hurriedly clutched his shoulder. "You're courting death. F****K him. Ding Mingyu and the rest had already rushed over when he crushed the talisman and shot out some distance. Immediately, dozens of hands containing terrifying energy slammed down without any hesitation. The boundless energy caused the blue-robed young man's eyes to widen. With his severely injured body, it was impossible for him to withstand a furious attack from dozens of people. He fiercely clenched his teeth, took out another talisman, and crushed it. His figure also disappeared from the encirclement of countless energies, appearing beside the group from the Serene Ocean Academy. All of this happened in a flash. By the time they reacted, Yin Yuting and Bing had already appeared beside Xian, while Shi Yuan had also blocked the Serene Ocean Academy students. Clang! The Netherworld Ruins sword fell to the ground, and Xian fell into Yin Yuting's arms. Her vision turned slightly black as her jade-like hands covered her neck. She had tried her best to dodge the attack just now, but the distance was too close. Even though she had tried her best to dodge, the green feather fan had still slashed across her throat. Immediately, fresh blood gushed out like water, continuously flowing through the gaps between her fingers. Even a god would have trouble recovering from an injury caused by a divine weapon, let alone a demon-rank Xian. Even if she had the five elements body, this wound would not heal in a short period of time. The power of the divine weapon would destroy all life in the vicinity of the wound. I seal. Bing hurriedly squatted down to take a look. He stretched out his palm like lightning and placed it on top of Xian's wound. With a light shout, monstrous cold air rapidly condensing into a piece of ice on her neck. The speed at which blood gushed out also slowed at this moment, but the wound did not show any signs of healing. Yiyun, who had jumped down with Jun Luo, Yi, and the others, rushed straight to Xian's side. She looked at the latter's pale face with some lingering fear, stretched out her jade-like hand, and said in horror, "Sister Xian, are you all right? What is this? Can you hear me?" Xian, who was originally drowsy, seemed to be amused when she saw Yi Yun's anxious appearance. A faint smile surfaced on her pale and pretty face. However, she did not dare to open her mouth to speak. The wound had penetrated through and was extremely close to her throat. It had even scraped against it. She was afraid that she would not be able to speak again if she opened her mouth. She struggled to hold the Netherworld Ruin sword in her arms. The power of a divine weapon was supreme over ordinary divine weapons. Although she was not the one who controlled the Netherworld Ruin sword, she could still borrow some of its power. The Netherworld Ruin sword clearly knew what she was thinking. Suddenly, a purplish-black power quietly entered Xian's body, slowly suppressing the power of the green feather fan. Shi Yuan, your remote sea academy is really courting death. Yin Feng's figure also appeared in a flash. When he saw Xian, who had collapsed in Yin Yuting's arms, his eyebrows involuntarily knitted together. His expression was furious as he looked at Shi Yuan in front of him. His low and deep voice was like rolling thunder as it spread. Immediately, the temperature of the area seemed to have unwittingly soared by a few hundred times. The deep voice, which was filled with murderous intent, seemed to carry a terrifying might as it spread across the Battle King stage. All sound was cut off at this moment, and even the flow of the air became still. Countless students could not help but be speechless. They shrunk their heads and had shocked expressions on their faces. They had never seen the usually smiling Yin Feng become so furious. That pressure caused them to feel as if they had lost their ability to sense energy, turning them into mere mortals. A feeling of fear rose from the bottom of their hearts. All the students looked at each other and involuntarily took a few steps back. They felt that the temperature of the world had risen explosively. It was as if Yin Feng only needed to think about it to incinerate the entire world. This feeling caused them to be somewhat shocked. This was the strength of a sky stage elder. It was terrifying to such an extent. Shi Yuan's face trembled. Yin Feng's roar had caused the surrounding temperature to rise by several times. Moreover, he was somewhat astonished to see that Yin Feng's aura had changed. At this moment, the latter seemed to have become a completely different person. He was no longer an elder of the Far Light Academy. Instead, it was as if he was speaking with the identity of a member of the Nine Divine Hall. Shi Yuan was stunned for a moment, before he subconsciously resisted Yin Feng's energy ripples. Soon after, he glanced at the blue-robed young man in front of him. At this moment, the latter's condition was even more miserable than Ziyan's. Half of his body had almost been cut off, causing Shi Yuan's eyelids to tremble slightly. Elder Yin Feng. Shi Yuan spoke in a deep voice. However, he had only spoken 4 words when he was interrupted by a voice that was so cold that it could freeze the world. If anything happens to her, the entire remote Ocean Academy will pay with your life. This voice sounded somewhat immature, but it spread throughout the entire Battle Monarch platform, causing countless students to shudder violently. Just a moment ago, they were still surging with waves of heat. At this moment, they seemed to vaguely see snow falling from the sky. It also seemed like an illusion. Yin Feng and the other 2 shuddered violently as well. They silently looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This was bad. If even she had noticed it, then the godchild should have noticed it as well. If Yin Nuoxing found out that the girl he had always cherished and couldn't bear to scold or beat, and he didn't want her to suffer the slightest bit of grievance, Shaguang City would probably be turned upside down. Shi Yuan also heard the cold voice and immediately frowned. He indeed didn't dare to shed all pretense of cordiality in the Far Light Academy. After all, this was someone else's territory. However, if he dared to say such words, wouldn't that be a declaration of war? Bang! Before he could speak, he saw the space beside Ziyin shatter like a mirror, and a hole that was over 10 feet tall suddenly appeared, after which the cold aura seemed to approach even closer. Along with it was a terrifying aura that caused the heavens and the earth to tremble. As soon as that aura appeared, Shi Yuan's heart immediately tightened. The energy in his body was like a mouse that had seen a cat, not daring to come out for even a moment. This kind of supreme suppression was definitely from a high-level god. Since when did the Far Light Academy have a high-level god? This news was like a bolt of lightning, causing Shi Yuan's body to violently shudder. He couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. His gaze was fixed on the hole, and his hands were tightly clenched due to nervousness. While the expressions of countless people changed, Yin Feng also respectfully stood in front of the cave entrance. At that spot, a petite figure slowly walked out, after which she gently stepped across the disjointed space and appeared in this deathly, silent world. Long wine-red hair, a delicate little face of no more than 13 or 14 years old, and a black and white dress. Naturally, it was Yi Shi. However, at this moment, her wine-red eyes were so cold that it could freeze space. Your Excellency, Shi Yuan felt a heaven-like pressure inadvertently spread throughout the entire field, and he violently shuddered. This aura, after Yi Shi appeared, she didn't even look at Shi Yuan. She turned around, and 2 small hands were hidden in her wide sleeves. She gently reached into the shattered space, and from the looks of it, she seemed to be supporting something. This caused everyone to be stunned. A moment later, a figure with long snow-white hair slowly walked out with the support of Yi Shi. As soon as the figure with long snow-white hair appeared, she attracted countless gazes, colorful eyes, and a familiar black windbreaker. Naturally, it was Yin Nuoxing. Ding Mingyu and the others also hurriedly looked at her. They saw her long snow-white hair and her beautiful face as pale as gold paper. They also sensed that her body was like a sieve filled with countless holes, constantly leaking the power of the stars. They were slightly stunned. They hadn't seen this guy for 2 days. How did he become so weak? Beside Yinuoxing, Feng was also gently supporting her. In the eyes of countless people, she was like an old man with one foot in the grave. Her legs were inconvenient, and her aura was incomparably weak. She was almost unable to sense her existence. Ignoring those gazes, Yin Nuoxing's bright eyes coldly glanced at Shi Yuan. Then, she glanced at the blue-robed young man beside him. After which, she was supported by Feng Er and Yi Shi as she hurriedly walked to Ziyan's side and slowly knelt down. Godchild, we failed in our duty. We didn't take good care of Miss Ziyan. Ice braced himself and sent a telepathic message, carefully glancing at Yin Nuoxing. It's okay. We all saw the scene here. It's not your fault. Yin Nuoxing shook her head gently and sent a telepathic message. After giving the Netherworld Ruined Sword to Ziyan, he was still worried, so he asked Yi Shi to pay attention to the situation here. Originally, when he saw that Ziyan won without any surprise, he calmed down and rested. He thought that everything would be fine, but he didn't expect such a twist in the end. When he saw Ziyan lying in a pool of blood, his heart ached so much that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Regardless of how weak his body was, he struggled to get out of bed. He only managed to teleport over with the help of Feng, and Yi Shi. Girl, seeing Ziyan's pale face and sweating nonstop, Yin Nuoxing's heart ached, and he blamed himself. If he had known, he wouldn't have let her come. Caressing Ziyan's face with his palm, Yin Nuoxing took out a pill and gently stuffed it into her little mouth. He sensed that it turned into a huge amount of life force that flowed rapidly in her body, and that terrifying wound healed quickly. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. If anything happened to Ziyan, he would blame himself for the rest of his life. Phew, he only used a little bit of energy to take out the pill and stuff it into Ziyan's mouth. This simple action caused Yin Nuoxing's body to tremble violently. His breathing suddenly became rapid, and large beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. It was as if he was the one who was seriously injured and not Ziyan. The surrounding people were a little confused, but when they saw that Ziyan's complexion was gradually recovering, many of them breathed a sigh of relief. Supporting Feng, Yin Nuoxing stood up with difficulty. Seeing him like this, Yi Shi's eyes were filled with pain. She said softly, "Brother Nuoxing, quickly go back and rest. Let me handle the rest." Yin Nuoxing was speechless. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing shook his head gently. When Yi Shi and Feng saw him shake his head, they were both stunned. Then, they couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Was he really angry? His next action caused the two of them to be slightly startled. Yin Nuoxing reached out and stroked his long hair for a while. A moment later, he took out a bracelet from his long hair. His dazzling white hair stretched to 20 feet long. Then, he picked up the Netherworld sword from ground. He stared coldly at Shi Yuan and the blue-robed youth. His beautiful face suddenly twisted, and his colorful eyes flickered with fury. "I'll kill you." In the void, the large words carved by the purple-red flames illuminated the horizon. The fierce, murderous aura caused the already cold air to almost freeze. Buzz! He crushed the soul-anchoring bracelet without hesitation. A vast amount of energy poured into his body. The Netherwind sword let out a sword hum that seemed angry and excited at the same time. The energy pillar that soared into the sky tore apart the space and clouds within a radius of 5,000 kilometers. "God, don't destroy the grand defensive formation." Yin Feng hurriedly shouted when he saw Yin Nuoxing's disregard for everything. His voice made countless people speechless. He wasn't worried about anything else. Instead, he was worried about the grand defensive formation. The moment his voice fell, the pillar of light that soared into the sky descended from the sky like the light of judgment. Chapter 720. Shabuang City, 9 Deities Hall's temporary residence. A ray of light rushed towards the residence. When it got close, a huge formation appeared in the sky above the residence. However, the light successfully passed through the formation and entered the residence. Then, it continued to fly, without stopping, and landed in front of the main hall of the residence. The light stopped for a moment and revealed a slender figure. She had a tall and slender figure. She exuded a natural and sacred aura that was close to that of a fairy. This person was Great Emperor Colored Glaze. After not seeing her for 2 to 3 days, her beautiful and noble face looked a little haggard. Her clothes were slightly messy, and she looked a little travel-worn. After tidying her clothes, the Empress covered her mouth and let out a long yawn. Then, she gently pushed open the door of the main hall. Just as she was about to walk in, her raised leg froze in midair. She opened her eyes wide in shock at Mei Mao. The hall was filled with layers upon layers of books, blocking the entrance. Many of these books had turned yellow and emitted a rotten smell. She didn't know what to say about such a magnificent scene. Moreover, it had blocked the entrance. Color glaze? Come in from the left side of the door. There's a gap there. Don't knock over the books. It wasn't easy for me to tidy them up. Empress Jin's tired voice came from the main hall. There was also the sound of books being flipped as if she was looking for some information. The Empress looked at the wall of books speechlessly. You call this tidying up? You just casually stack them here, and you call this tidying up? After a moment, she sighed helplessly and walked in carefully. Then, she closed the door behind her. Then, she looked at the left side and saw a gap. That gap was just enough for her to walk in sideways. Her chest and back were almost touching the wall of books. She walked sideways with difficulty along the wall of books. She walked one round in this maze-like place and came to the center. Then, she saw a small house that was stacked with books. Is this what you meant when you said that it was tidied up? The Empress was speechless. The books were arranged in the shape of a house. Was he playing with them? Outside the hut, there was a small wooden table. Only then did the Empress realize that even the floor was covered with a layer of books. Beside the small table, the Golden Empress lay weakly on the table. Her jade-like arms and legs were so alluring that one would have a nosebleed just by looking at them. Gently lifting her eyelids, the Golden Empress saw the Empress walking in. She said weakly, "Oh, I have already finished reading all the books that I have folded. I was afraid that I would forget to read them after storing them in the space container. Therefore, I had no choice but to put them out." Then, he pointed at the dozens of books on the table and yawned. There's still some left. There's another batch in the space container. I'm about to fall asleep. The Empress sat down helplessly, picked up the book on the surface, looked at the title, and couldn't help but read it out softly. Introduction to the Topography of the Southern Plains, with topographic changes from the end of the 137 era to the beginning of the 138 era, volume 1995. Why, are you flipping through these books? The Empress was speechless as she put down the book in her hand. Her cheeks couldn't help but twitch. How much perseverance did this guy have? No, how bored did he have to be to flip through these books? What am I doing? The Empress lifted her head weakly and pulled her feather robe over to cover her bare shoulders. On that graceful and dignified face of hers, there were 2 big dark circles under her eyes. She had simply used her actions to prove that even an Emperor God expert would be exhausted after reading too many books. Some time ago, after learning about Little Star's situation, we all went to the Southern Plains and asked the people from the 9 temples to help us find him. However, there was no news at the moment. I can only do it myself to see if there is anything recorded in the books. After saying this, the Golden Empress knocked her head on the table again. Facts have proven that. I don't want to touch books for the next 10 million years, especially books with topography and words. The Golden Empress muttered weakly. She sounded like she was about to collapse. The Empress was speechless. Looking at the exquisitely decorated study room, she sighed. With a wave of her hand, she kept all the books in her waist token. Looking at the sleepy Golden Empress, she sighed helplessly and said, "You have lived for tens of millions of years, yet you still don't know how to take care of yourself. After saying this, the Empress lifted her up and kept the rest of the books in her waist token. Then, she carried the Golden Empress back to her room. Covering herself with a blanket, the Empress was about to leave when the Golden Empress suddenly said in her sleep, "Southern Plains. Starfall Plains." When the Empress heard this, she was slightly stunned. Then, she smiled gently and said to herself, "All right, I have received the message. Go to sleep, arrogant fellow." After walking out of the room, the Empress faced the sunlight and stretched her body. Then, her gaze froze, and she hurriedly looked towards the northwest. Buzz! In the northwest sky, an extremely bright purplish-black light illuminated half the sky. That extremely terrifying yet familiar power made the Empress stare at Mei Mao in astonishment. "Little brother?" The Empress stared at Mei Mao in astonishment. Little brother should be in the academy, right? What happened that made him use such a powerful power? Mei Mao glanced at the residents and hesitated for a moment. Then, she turned her gaze towards the bright purplish-black light in the sky. She nodded slightly, then her delicate body swayed slightly and disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already at the academy's main gate. Above the black stone platform, the Empress looked at the violent sword chi that was rushing towards the southwest. Mei Mao paused and looked at it with some trepidation. Mei Mao turned around and saw that there was a huge hole in the sky over Yuanguang Academy. She was slightly stunned. A protective array? Isn't the academy itself in Xiaoguang City? The Empress looked at the gigantic protective array that had been cleaved apart by the Nether Void sword and felt a little embarrassed. That array had connected the Yuanguang Academy to Xiaoguang City, and after the sword ray had broken through it, it had pierced through the array. That burst of energy had probably alarmed everyone in Xiaoguang City. The sword chi of the Nether Void sword. If it explodes, the Empress clenched her teeth as she looked at the increasingly violent sword chi that was rushing into the distance. She raised her hand and pointed it in the direction that the sword chi was heading. If it was allowed to explode, everything within a radius of 100,000 miles would probably be annihilated. The Empress took a light breath and raised her eyebrows. A word came out her mouth. "Reverse." She clenched her jade-like hand tightly the moment her words left her mouth, after which her wrist abruptly turned in a circle. The energy sword light 100,000 feet away seemed to have solidified as it suddenly became sluggish. Subsequently, the vast destructive power paused as the enormous sword light rapidly shrank towards the center. Finally, it gently dissipated into the air. The Empress withdrew her trembling hand back into her sleeve. She smiled bitterly and rubbed her numb right hand. She felt a little emotional. Her little brother was getting more and more powerful. He was able to withdraw the sword chi from so far away, but it still caused the energy in her body to become chaotic. Let's go and see what happened first. Mei Mao shook her head and smiled bitterly. Her delicate figure once again disappeared into thin air. On the Battle Monarch platform, an incomparably huge crack ran through it. Perhaps it couldn't be described as run through, because the platform had already been shattered into countless pieces by that violent energy. Even the ground below had been cracked into a deep abyss that was 100,000 feet wide. The shattered rocks were thrown into the sky. As the sword chi dissipated, it was like a rain of rocks falling from the sky. They fell onto the Battle Monarch platform and created a rumbling sound. It was as if there was an aftershock. The students in the arena all fled to the energy barrier in the spectator stands. They hugged their heads and squatted down. They were afraid that those huge rocks would fall on their heads and cause them to be collateral damage. As the purple-black sword chi disappeared into the distance, the chaotic energy of heaven and earth and elemental energy slowly regained their balance. A part of the spectator stands also melted. The students in the spectator stands had already been moved away when Yin Feng and the other two felt that something was wrong. The direction that the sword chi flew towards was just an empty space in the academy. At this moment, they were all rejoicing that the Battle Monarch platform and the War God Temple were located in the northwest of the academy. There weren't any buildings. If that sword chi had gone in another direction, half of the academy would have been destroyed. After the energy stabilized, the remaining half of the spectator stands popped their heads out in horror. They looked at the battle monarch platform that had disappeared, the spectator stands that had disappeared, and the mountain that had been split into two. They all swallowed their saliva with difficulty. Regardless of whether it was the students of the Distant Light Academy or the Remote Ocean Academy, they all looked at Yun Nuoxing as if they were looking at a monster. How could a student of the Devil's Step be able to release such energy? How could someone who could release such energy come to a place like this to cultivate? Whoosh! The sound of wind breaking resounded on the Battle Monarch platform. It was the elders of the Distant Light Academy and the Remote Ocean Academy. At this moment, the former and the others looked at the 10,000 feet tall Battle Monarch platform with a strange feeling in their hearts. They inadvertently looked at Yun Nuoxing with flickering eyes, as if they were thinking about something. Yun Nuoxing slowly withdrew her sword. Her hair that had regained its color for a moment had turned white again. It was so white that it was dazzling to the eyes. It was so white that it was terrifying. Bang! A muffled sound came from aside. Everyone turned their heads and saw two figures appear. One of them was Yin Feng, while the other was thrown on the ground. His appearance was as if he had been dismembered. He was missing an arm or a leg, and his aura was extremely weak. The disgusting scene made many people feel nauseous. Huff, this fellow is still alive. I really don't know if he's lucky or unlucky. Yin Feng looked at Shi Yuan, who was on the verge of death, with lingering fear. He couldn't help but sigh. This person was the dean of the Remote Ocean Academy. At this moment, Shi Yuan was indeed still alive because he was still breathing. However, there wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't injured. It was a mess of flesh and blood, as if he had been skinned and rolled in a pot of boiling oil before falling from a high altitude into a meat patty. It was so terrifying that it made people feel disgusted. Although they didn't know what method Shi Yuan had used to survive that sword ray, he had paid a terrible price. If it was someone else, they would probably rather die. Even if they survived, their strength would plummet, and they might even be crippled for life. What was the point of living? Those who had more or less interacted with Yun Nuoxing looked at Shi Yuan's miserable state with a strange expression. If he's dead, then he's dead. He should have died a long time ago. He should feel lucky that he was able to live for a few more minutes. Yishi narrowed her eyes and snorted coldly. From the moment Shi Yuan had interfered in the battle and caused Xian to be seriously injured, she had already treated him as a dead man. The sword aura of the Netherworld Ruins sword will continue to erode his flesh and blood, scraping his soul inch by inch until his soul is completely destroyed. Unless a god intervenes, no one can save him. Yishi's indifferent voice caused everyone to shiver. The words coming out of this rather cute little girl's mouth were truly frightening. Buzz. A slight fluctuation appeared in the air again. Everyone hurriedly turned their gazes and looked at Yun Nuoxing and the others not far away. The space there was distorted, and everyone was stunned. Someone else was coming. A moment later, a slender and beautiful figure slowly appeared. That noble and holy appearance and temperament was naturally the Empress. The sunlight transformed into specks of gold that fell and shone on her body. It was as if she was draped in a golden dress. That exquisite face and full curves were all lit up by the golden light, making her appear even more sacred. She was like a peony that stood aloof from the world. Looking at her, these inexperienced little brats were all stunned. Many of them actually blushed in the spectator seats. Many young girls curled their lips in disgust when they saw the covetous and flushed looks of the male students beside them. Did these guys not have any resistance to a royal sister at all? Couldn't they control their expressions in public? After the Empress appeared, she saw Xian fainted in Yin Yuting's arms. Yun Nuoxing looked up at the sky, her silvery white hair fluttering in the wind like the Milky Way. The Netherworld Ruins sword had already been retracted into her body. As if she had sensed the Empress's appearance, Yun Nuoxing's dazed gaze turned slightly. At the last moment, she saw the Empress walking over anxiously. Her vision completely darkened, and her body went limp. Feng, who was supporting him from the side, saw that he had fainted again and hurriedly pulled him into her arms. Her beautiful crimson eyes stared at his pale face, and there was a hint of heartache in her eyes. This fellow, why was he so stubborn? Even if this matter was left to them, it would have been fine. However, even if Yin Noashing didn't say anything, Feng and Yishi could sense his obsession. It was the kind of obsession that wanted to personally kill his enemy, as if that was the best way to vent his hatred. Seeing that Yun Nuashing had fainted after she appeared, the Empress was shocked. She quickly walked to his side and squatted down. Her jade-like hand gently touched his wrist, and a wisp of energy entered Yun Nuashing's body. She sensed his terrible condition just by sensing it, and her pretty face changed slightly. The injuries caused by the exhaustion of his body were even more serious than the previous time in the maze. Who can explain to me what happened? The Empress was at a loss. Chapter 721. In the room that was filled with fragrance, a group of people stood around a bed. They looked at the two unconscious people on the bed with concern in their eyes. On the edge of the bed, the Empress bent down slightly. Her jade-like hands moved up and down on Yun Nuashing's lifeline as she tried to sense it. However, the more she sensed, the more she frowned. Beside Yun Nuashing, Xian was also unconscious. However, her beautiful face was rosy, and the feeling of weakness had disappeared. She would wake up naturally when the time came. Compared to Xian, her situation was much better. Sigh. After fiddling with it for a long time, the Empress sighed softly. That sigh made everyone in the room tense up. They hurriedly raised their heads and saw her slowly stand up with a puzzled expression on her pretty face. Their hearts trembled. Sister Lioli? Feng asked from the side. Her delicate face had an inquiring look. I don't understand. The Empress smiled bitterly. She covered her face with her jade-like hands and sighed. I have never seen such a situation in my life. The energy that just recovered seems to have been absorbed by something. Furthermore, it seems to have been absorbed from within. As for the injury, it's still the same. He was already extremely weak, but he still forcefully used the soul-stabilizing bracelet to recover his energy. Furthermore, he launched that attack in an instant. His injuries have worsened. Let him recuperate quietly for a period of time. The Empress sighed softly. Then, Mei Mao turned to Feng and Xiao Bai and asked doubtfully, both of you have a soul contract with him. Can't you see what's going on? Upon hearing this, Feng and Xiao Bai shook their heads. They had never seen such a situation. If a magical artifact was upgrading and absorbing Yin Noashing's energy, both of them could accurately identify which magical artifact it was. However, this was the first time they had seen such a situation. Unlasheen stretched out her jade-like hand and pointed at the black mark on the right side of Yin Noashing's face. She couldn't help but ask, could it be this? It can't be. Little Star himself said that this matter had nothing to do with him. As I shook his head, buzz, while everyone was talking, a faint buzzing sound suddenly rang out in the room. Soon after, everyone could feel that the energy in the surroundings had all started to boil, causing everyone to be stunned. They hurriedly turned their gazes towards the source of the change and saw Yishi fiddling with a palm-sized formation in her small hands. Done! Yishi heaved a sigh of relief as she held a palm-sized array in her hand. She wiped away a drop of sweat from her forehead and looked at everyone. She smiled and jumped down from the table, running to Yin Nuashing's side. This is... Everyone looked at the complex array and couldn't help but blink. The array was so complex that it was almost completely occupied by energy lines. Perhaps only by zooming in could they see the specific lines. Heaven's seizing array, Yishi softly muttered. Soon after, she pressed the palm-sized array into Yun Nuashing's chest and explained, seizing the fortune of the world and seizing the energy of the world. This array has been compressed into a small piece. I estimate that it can seize all the energy within a radius of 10,000 miles. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but open their mouths. However, before they could say anything, the array quietly fused into Yuan Nuoxing's chest. After a burst of light, everyone felt as if the world was rumbling outside the small palace. The sky suddenly became slightly distorted. Streaks of azure light rapidly condensed. The wind and clouds surged as the azure light rapidly condensed. Balls of light containing dense energy floated up from the lake and forest below and fused into the azure light gathering in the sky. After the azure light gathered for a while, it finally revealed its true form. It was a huge energy whirlpool that was hundreds of thousands of feet wide. The wild and violent suction force from the center of the whirlpool caused the whirlpool to rapidly rotate. The endless amount of energy in the world turned into rich energy light clusters that merged into the whirlpool, causing the size of the energy whirlpool to rapidly expand. When the vortex appeared, it also gave birth to an abnormally powerful pressure. That terrifying pressure descended from the sky. Countless students of the Longguang Academy raised their heads in shock. When they saw the incomparably huge energy vortex in the sky, their mouths were wide open in shock. Their jaws were about to dislocate. In the freshman area, the people who had just arrived at the entrance of the Green Lotus Society felt this enormous pressure the clearest. They hurriedly raised their heads and couldn't help but be stunned. Then, they looked in the direction of the vortex, and their expressions changed. What a big commotion! The door of the building in front of them suddenly opened. A young man and a young girl quickly walked out. When the two of them saw the enormous array that occupied the entire sky, they couldn't help but be speechless. Junior Lin Sheng. Junior Lin Sheng's palace is also in that direction, right? Among the group of people in front of the door, the silver-eyed girl was the most dazzling. She raised her head to look at the vortex, then looked at Lin Sheng and asked, let's go. I'll go take a look too." The two people who walked out were naturally Lin Sheng and Yi Qinglian. The former smiled and nodded. He waved his hand and took the lead to walk towards the center of the vortex. Behind him, the rest hurriedly followed. Just as they left, the incomparably huge energy vortex in the sky suddenly trembled. Then, the energy rapidly shrank towards the center. The size of the vortex also shrank abruptly under the gazes of countless people. From its original size of nearly 10 million feet, it slowly shrank until it was only 10,000 feet in size. Then, it completely dissipated in a few breaths' time. After the energy vortex disappeared, the students of the Longguang Academy scratched their heads in confusion. They still didn't realize what had just happened. However, the sensitive people seemed to be able to sense that the energy density in the training ground had decreased a little. Even the strong and verdant trees were somewhat withered and sickly. However, they didn't take a closer look and just treated it as an illusion. In a room in the palace, Yishi looked indifferently at a lump of energy the size of a head floating in front of her. The energy contained within that lump of energy was condensed by extracting 1/5 of all the energy within a circumference of 5,000 kilometers. It was also compressed by countless energy to form this lump of energy. This lump of energy had already condensed into a material form and was no longer illusory. The energy that was spreading out made the Empress and the others know that if this lump of energy were to explode, this Longguang Academy would become history. After becoming a God Emperor, Yishi's attainments and arrays were many times more profound than before. Even if she was just an early-stage God Emperor, those techniques that she casually displayed made the Empress and in Lixin's hearts palpitate. During a battle, if an array master would set up an array, trouble would follow. Even if a single piece couldn't kill someone, as long as they were given a moment, they could immediately set up a second piece, a third piece, and so on until the opponent was exhausted to death. Yishi's little hand gently caressed the condensed lump of energy. She took in a light breath and formed a few hand seals with her little hand. After that, she lightly shouted, "Heaven-seizing array, energy, synchronization." The moment she shouted, that solid lump of energy trembled violently. The heaven-seizing array that shrunk in front of Yun Nuoxing's chest extended out dozens of energy lines. Following that, the energy lines entwined around the lump of energy. Wong. The energy lines entwined around the lump of energy. That lump of energy also gradually emitted a bright light. A vast energy ripple flowed out from it, causing ripples in the air. That ripple of energy caused everyone in the room to grin and unconsciously take a small step back. After a moment, that lump of energy that was emitting light abruptly shrunk back, causing everyone to be startled. The energy lump of energy that had retracted its light was now a rainbow-colored energy crystal. One could see the energy lines that extended out from Yun Nuoxing's chest greedily absorbing the energy within the crystal, causing its light to rapidly dim. The Empress and the others were also astonished as they sensed that the energy was rapidly disappearing. Don't tell me it's not enough. Yishi was also somewhat astonished as she watched the energy contained within the energy crystal disappearing rapidly. In just half a minute, 1/5 of the energy within the crystal had already disappeared. Even her face couldn't help but twitch when she saw this. The energy that had been condensed was equivalent to a full-powered attack from a Netherworld Emperor expert. Yishi took a deep breath and looked at the energy crystal solemnly. If it still wasn't enough, she would use the heaven-seizing array with all her might, even if she had to fight until the ground withered. She would truly seize all the energy within a 10,000-mile radius. However, if she did that, the land within the 10,000-mile radius would be completely barren. If that doesn't work, I'll just expand the range of the heaven-seizing array to 1,000,000 miles. A terrifying thought flashed across her mind. However, Yishi didn't care. What did the others have to do with her? However, Yishi's thought dissipated after a short while, because she saw that the energy within the energy crystal finally stopped disappearing when only 1/10 of it was left. As the energy from the energy crystal stopped disappearing, everyone was also surprised to see that there was a fluctuation of energy in Yun Nuoxing's almost withered body at this moment. Specks of stars twinkled in her body. When that familiar power of stars appeared, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Phew! Yishi also heaved a sigh of relief. She really intended to suck the energy within a 10,000-mile radius dry just now. Although I still don't know what happened in the end, at least the absorption of energy seems to have stopped. There is also energy circulating in little brother's body. I think he will recover soon. The Empress also heaved a sigh of relief. Mei Mao stared intently at Yun Nuoxing's beautiful face. As the energy recovered, the dark mark on the right side of her face also gradually faded. This made her slightly happy. The seal appeared because the origin energy of the godly body of Yun Nuoxing was depleted, and the suppression on the seal weakened. Now that the seal had dimmed, it meant that the origin energy of the godly body of Yun Nuoxing had been replenished and was beginning to recover. Let's go out too. Leave this place to Lachine and the others. We won't disturb their rest. Yishi nodded, then smiled at the helpless Lachine and Jingyu before walking out of the room. The Empress and the others also smiled and walked out slowly, leaving Lachine, Jingyu, and Feng in the room. I have become a professional nanny. Looking at the room quickly becoming empty, Lachine also smiled helplessly. About this. Upon hearing this, Mei Mao blinked her eyes. She lifted the quilt with her jade-like hands and fiddled with Yun Nuoxing's chest for a while. After a long time, she took out 2 things from the pendant and casually handed them to Lachine and Jingyu. Lachine and Jingyu took the things curiously. After taking a closer look, they found that they were 2 transparent beads the size of a thumb. They looked like an empty shell, and the things inside had long disappeared. They asked curiously, "What are these?" "They are the empty shells of top-grade glazed crystals." I picked them up. Feng stuck out her tongue and said, "Exener, inject your origin energy into them and seal them up. As long as you wear these, you won't need to look after Xingxing when she is unconscious." Xiaobai and I have deduced a few times. There shouldn't be a problem. Feng smiled gently. Hearing this, The Lachine duo also nodded their heads gently. They looked at each other and gripped the beads tightly in their hands. They inhaled a deep breath of air and adjusted their breathing. A moment later, they slowly released that demonic energy. On their bodies, one could see the energy transforming into the appearance of a celestial fox and a celestial crane. Strands of demonic and almost celestial aura slowly flowed out and endlessly poured into the beads in their hands. Seeing them start to move, Feng also smiled faintly. Mei Mao turned around and looked at Yun Nuoxing, who was sleeping on the bed. She reached out her jade-like fingers and poked his face. She whispered softly in her heart, "The darkness in your heart can only be suppressed by 4 kinds of divine energy. Little star, what kind of unknown things are hidden in your heart?" Feng sighed softly. She bent down slightly and kissed the young man's lips with her red lips. She hugged his head and gazed at his beautiful face with her eyes full of tenderness. Her small hands gently stroked Yun Nuoxing's head and ears as she whispered softly but firmly in her heart, "No matter what, I will protect you." Chapter 722. Sunlight sprinkled down from the horizon. The lazy side of the sun was replaced by intense sunlight that showered the entire myriad god's world. Unknowingly, the aura of summer permeated the air. In the Farlight Academy, there were countless students cultivating in the volcanic training grounds. Suddenly, the intense sunlight shone on their bodies, coupled with the fiery aura of the volcano, caused a layer of sweat to form on their bodies. Those who had just finished their cultivation couldn't help but let out 2 dry howls. The competition between the 2 academies that ended yesterday ended with a strange atmosphere under the gazes of 90% of the students of the Farlight Academy. The news naturally spread out, but when people talked about it, they all had a strange feeling in their hearts. When the competition for the top 10 was halfway through, almost every student of the Farlight Academy thought that they were going to lose. However, the situation that happened at the very last moment caused the blood of many students to boil. Ziyan's domineering attack, fighting against 4 opponents by herself, seriously injuring all of them with a single strike. Such a turn of events caused the students of the Farlight Academy to be extremely excited. The originally unknown 36th ranked girl on the Devil rankings was now placed on the same level as the top 3 rankers on the Devil rankings. However, the things that happened after that caused everyone to be even more shocked. The ending of that matter was for the elders to clean up the mess. Shi Yuan was sent back to the Tranquil Sea Academy. Whether he was dead or not, that had become a mystery. However, from the looks of his injuries, it was likely that he wouldn't be better off alive than dead. As for the news of that incident, it was sealed off by the elders. However, it was useless even if it was sealed off. 90% of the students of the Farlight Academy were present that day, so there was no difference between sealing it off and not sealing it off. However, it also allowed the students to know that it was better not to speak carelessly about this matter. After that incident, no one heard what happened to the youth ranked 4th on the Devil rankings. However, the strange appearance of the Heavenly Flame Peak caused many students to be puzzled. Such a method of handling the matter also caused the matter to be shrouded in mystery. In the end, no one knew the name of the youth ranked 4th, nor did they know his background. They only saw him suddenly appear and create a huge ruckus, almost killing the principal of the remote Ocean Academy on the spot. As for the other details, not many people knew because when that graceful sword strike landed, everyone was covering their heads and fleeing like rats. As for the few people who knew about Yun Nuoxing's background, they wouldn't talk about it casually. This matter was something that only the few of them knew about. He didn't want to become famous or anything. At this moment, this group of people was standing in front of a small palace by the lakeside. They looked at the palace, which seemed a little strange, and were somewhat hesitant. Who would have thought that this inconspicuous palace would be overseen by several top-notch experts of the God Realm? Although they were here to check on injuries, they didn't know if they would be chased out. After pacing around the door for a few minutes, Lin Sheng nodded at Chuan Mu and the rest. Then, he took a deep breath and walked up to the tightly shut door. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached out and knocked lightly on the door. "Come in." Just as his fingers touched the door, a somewhat childish voice came from inside the house. This voice was naturally Yi Shi's. That day, he was almost killed by her. Hearing her voice now made his heart beat for no reason. Hearing this, Lin Sheng swallowed his saliva and waved behind him. Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu, and the rest saw this and carefully followed behind him. Yi Qingyan instantly ran to Lin Sheng's side and held his hand with her small hand as she smiled faintly at him. Phew! Slowly pushing the door open, Lin Sheng and the rest took a deep breath. Then they stepped forward in unison, stepped through the door, and walked in. Swoosh! Just as they stepped through the door, they felt their vision suddenly turn blurry. Soon after, they felt as if the world was spinning. However, it only lasted for an instant. After stabilizing, everyone lifted their heads in a daze. They saw a vast courtyard, and they could not see the end of the courtyard with a single glance. This. Lin Sheng looked at this scene in shock. The courtyard in front of him was very ordinary. It was very big, and there was a small bamboo forest. Under his feet was a winding gravel path. Beside the bamboo forest, there was a clear lake. This is a magic array? An illusion array, or what the hell? Lin Sheng scratched his face in shock. The only thing he could be sure of was that when they came in, they were strangely messed up. As for how this messed up was done, he didn't know. Let's go and see. At this time, Ding Mingyu was the first to calm down. She walked gracefully and walked in front, waving at the rest. The people sitting in the house were all top gods. If they wanted to kill them, it would only be a matter of moving their fingers. They weren't worried that the other party would want their lives. Let's go first. Lin Gong and the rest nodded lightly. Seeing this, everyone nodded and walked slowly along the gravel path. They didn't know how long they walked. The gravel path, the lake, the bamboo forest. The scenery gradually changed. They walked from the small courtyard to the vast wilderness. Inexplicably, they appeared on a mountain peak. Inexplicably, they appeared underground. For some reason, they flew into the sky. As they walked, they didn't even know that they had walked into the bottom of the sea. Unknowingly, they walked for 2 hours. Everyone stopped, their faces covered in sweat. It was very difficult to walk here. It was as if the air was especially heavy, causing their bodies to feel heavy. Obviously, there was something strange about this place. Lin Sheng wiped his sweat and frowned. Was this a test for them? Or was this a test for him? He was the only magic array master present. Naturally, he thought of this. However, along the way, he also tried many methods. Whether it was using energy to explore the path or try to break the restrictions, there was no movement at all. An illusion array? An overlapping illusion array? Or, Lin Sheng muttered to himself. A bright light flashed in his black eyes. His sharp gaze constantly scanned his surroundings. However, he couldn't see anything strange. It was as if they were indeed on a mountain peak. His gaze swept across his surroundings again and again. Lin Sheng muttered to himself for a moment. Then, he waved his hand, and a huge amount of demonic energy gathered in his palm. With a flick of his finger, the demonic energy rushed forward. Buzz, the demonic energy didn't rush out for long before it suddenly stopped in midair. No, rather than saying that it stopped, it was more accurate to say that it hit something and was blocked. Then, Lin Sheng and the rest were stunned to see the demonic energy rush back along the path it had rushed out. It looked as if it had bounced back. Furthermore, when it bounced back, the demonic energy condensed into the shape of a demonic dragon. It opened its mouth and roared at them. Chuan Mu frowned as he looked at the demonic dragon that was rushing towards him. However, he did not think too much about it, as he suddenly extended his hand and easily shattered the demonic dragon. However, his hand also trembled slightly as he shattered the demonic dragon. The energy has been amplified? Chuan Mu muttered in shock. Lin Sheng was only around the 5th transition of the half-devil level. However, the attack just now was unleashed by a practitioner who was comparable to the 5th seal of the half-devil level. Ding Mingyu also noticed the situation. She muttered to herself for a moment before gently opening her red lips. Don't use your energy carelessly. When the demonic energy was reflected back, it was dozens of times stronger. If we casually unleash an attack with our strength, the energy reflected back will be at the demigod level. The faint voice caused everyone's cheeks to twitch slightly. Was this even possible? Lin Sheng muttered to himself for a moment before saying, Let's walk a little more. Everyone smiled bitterly but nodded. After resting for a while, they all stood up and strolled leisurely in front of them. As they strolled around, another 2 hours unknowingly passed. Lin Sheng looked at the ice plains below and suddenly felt his heart become a little chaotic. They had walked and somehow ended up on this ice plains. Furthermore, the snow was very real. The cold air turned into frost when they breathed. Even the snow under their feet felt real when they stepped on it. Gosh, I feel like it's a waste not to travel in this lifetime. Chuan Mu smiled bitterly and shook his head. In just 4 hours, they had gone up to the sky, down to the sea, across mountains and over glaciers. It felt like they had been everywhere. The scenery was real and beautiful. Everyone smiled bitterly. Let's talk about traveling after we get out. Lin Sheng scratched his head in distress and sighed. He glanced at Yi Qinglian beside him and subconsciously took a step back, wanting to say something. Swoosh! The moment he took a step back, everyone's vision blurred and they suddenly felt as if the world was spinning. A moment later, everyone's figures suddenly stopped. The cold air disappeared and the snowflakes no longer existed. Lin Sheng cried out in surprise. Ding Mingyu and the rest also raised their heads in a daze. Soon after, they saw that the glacier had disappeared and a large hall had appeared in front of them. A few people were seated on the sofa in the hall. All of them were holding their chins as they calmly looked at them. Yi Shi, who was seated in the middle, had an indifferent expression. She gently sipped a mouthful of tea and no ripples appeared in her wine-red eyes. Was she back? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Why was she back? For hours. Almost the time limit. Yishi lifted her big eyes slightly and glanced at Lin Sheng as she said indifferently, how do we come back? Lin Sheng smiled bitterly and clasped his hands together. He still braced himself and asked. Yishi glanced at him lightly. That glance made Lin Sheng smile even more bitterly. He was being despised. The sea of bitterness has no bounds. Turn back and the shore is at hand. Yishi picked up her teacup and said this sentence lightly, making everyone collapse. Was it because Lin Sheng took a step back that they came back? Then what was the point of walking for 4 hours? Looking at the scenery? I think it's actually not bad. 4 hours is already not bad. At this moment, the Empress took a sip of tea and smiled faintly. Maybe there's a problem with the way I measured it. Hearing this, Yishi pursed her lips disapprovingly. She put down her teacup and said softly, Brother Nua came out in 4 seconds. It would have been better if she didn't say this because she didn't have a rough measure. However, once she said it, Lin Sheng and the rest felt as if an arrow had pierced through their hearts. He used the light element to advance for 1 second, move horizontally for 2 seconds, and retreat for the last second. Then he came out. When Yishi talked about yin nuashing, there was a faint smile on her face. It has already become a habit. Maybe he has been to too many places, so he has this kind of action. He accidentally bumped into us and came out. Hearing this, Lin Sheng and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. However, the corners of their eyes couldn't help but twitch. They walked bitterly for 4 hours, and yin nuashing habitually retreated before coming out. Sure enough, their thinking patterns were too different. The standard for measuring the little brother should be at the beginner level of the god level. These children are only at the devil level. Don't use such a high standard to measure them. The Empress's faint smile made Lin Sheng and the rest almost vomit blood. It was a blatant mockery and a blatant blow. They were obviously about the same age, so why were their standards so different? I suddenly came up with that formation on a whim. I haven't adjusted it yet. After I adjust it, I will test it again. For example, I can cut off the way back or turn it into a cliff. Yishi's indifferent words made Lin Sheng and the rest shudder. This little girl looked so cute, but why would she say such frightening words? Chapter 723. In the quiet and magnificent hall, Lin Sheng and the rest sat on the sofa, feeling a little uneasy. From time to time, they would raise their heads carefully to look at the few emperor gods sitting opposite them. However, the emperor gods were very calm and did not have any special aura. However, they could not sense any energy waves. At such a close range, the energy had long been subconsciously controlled by the emperor gods. The few people in front of them were all experts at the top of the pyramid. Lin Sheng and the rest were only at the demon level. Even though they looked like girls in their teens or 20s, he did not dare to look at them casually. No one would have expected the emperor gods to be so young and beautiful. Beside Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, Ding Mingyu, Jun Luo Yi, and the rest were also a little restless. The atmosphere should have been very heavy because Yi Shi and the rest were just drinking tea. However, for some reason, the atmosphere did not seem heavy at all. Instead, it seemed a little peaceful. It was as if they were sitting face to face and chatting. "Aren't you drinking?" The Empress sensed their awkwardness and could not help but smile faintly. She stretched out her slender, jade-like hand, picked up the teapot, and gently poured emerald green tea into the cups. The crisp sound caused Lin Sheng and the others to slightly regain their senses. The Empress gently pushed the teacup in front of them. Lin Sheng and the rest calmed down slightly. Looking at the emerald tea in the teacup, they couldn't help but be stunned. The dense fragrance of the tea lingered in front of their nostrils, causing them to have a strong desire to drink the tea in one gulp. Ding Mingyu was a little more relaxed. She held the jade-like teacup in her white hand and took a sip. Then, her silver eyes suddenly lit up. The tea contained a strange energy. As soon as it entered her stomach, it turned into energy and spread to her limbs and bones. That feeling was very strange. It made her whole body comfortable, and she couldn't help but want to moan softly. Lin Sheng and the rest also closed their eyes and could not help but take a deep breath. This feeling was very strange. They felt as if they were floating in the air, as if something was brewing in their bodies. Seeing that Lin Sheng and the rest had finished the tea in one go, the Empress smiled faintly and took a sip of the tea. Suddenly, she felt that something was amiss. Her pretty face changed slightly. Looking at the emerald tea, she exclaimed, "Oh no, I made the wrong tea." This sudden sentence made Lin Sheng and the others almost spit out their tea. They hurriedly looked up at her and widened their eyes. They could not help but ask, "What will happen if we drink it?" "It's fine if we drink it, but if you drink it, you'll sleep for about a month." The Empress looked at them with a smile, and from her alluring red lips came a sentence that made everyone's face turn bitter. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of teacups falling to the ground suddenly came from beside Lin Sheng. He was so shocked that he hurriedly turned his head, only to see Yi Qinglian, Ding Mingyu, and the rest lying unconscious on the sofa. If he didn't feel that something was brewing in their bodies, he would have thought that this group of God Lord experts was playing with them to death. You didn't drink it?" A beautiful voice sounded in his ear, causing Lin Sheng to shiver. He turned his head stiffly and saw a few people looking at him with a sly smile on their faces. That look in their eyes caused his face to turn pale immediately. Yishi suddenly ran to his side, scaring him so much that he almost jumped up. However, he was held in place by a force, causing him to be unable to move. Yishi glanced at him, waved her small hand, and drew out the tea. Then, without any explanation, she poured it into Lin Sheng's mouth. As she poured it, she said, "Tea made from dreams spirit crystal. After drinking it, you can cultivate in your dreams and gain enlightenment in your dreams. Don't worry and continue dreaming." Lin Sheng had a bitter look on his face. That tea was poured directly into his mouth, and he had no choice but to drink it. He could only swallow the tea unwillingly. After a while, he also collapsed with a loud bang and collapsed together with Yi Qinglian. After knocking Lin Sheng down, Yishi patted her hands gently and sat back on the sofa. Just as she took a sip of tea, she suddenly felt as if she had forgotten something. She couldn't help but ask, whose blood was used to make this dream spirit crystal? The Empress was stunned. Her red lips opened and her cheeks twitched slightly. After a while, she laughed dryly and said, I think it's little brother's. It's over. Hearing this, Yi Shi and Lixin and the rest couldn't help but cover their faces. If the dream spirit crystal were to depict Yun Nuoxing in Lin Sheng's and the rest dreams, wouldn't they go crazy? Don't worry too much. Zi waved her lily-white hand and said softly, These children have strong hearts. At most, they will be afraid when they see Little Star, but they won't go crazy. Everyone said, Why do I feel that they will beat him up when they come out? Zi was also stunned when she heard this. After thinking seriously for a while, she nodded and said, That's also possible. After all, they had to be tortured in the dream for a month in the dream in the vast white world. Lin Sheng only felt a little dizzy. After a long while, he came back to his senses. He looked up and saw a vast expanse of white in front of him. It was like a rolling fog that slowly dissipated. Rubbing his eyes, Lin Sheng stood up and looked at the place. After the fog dissipated, a huge plain appeared. A gentle breeze blew, and the grass rustled softly. At the end of the horizon, he saw a huge lake. Or rather, it would be more appropriate to call it an ocean. And in the middle of the ocean, there was an incomparably huge black iron pillar. He wasn't unfamiliar with this iron pillar. It was the pillar of creation that he had seen before. The dream is so realistic. Lin Sheng looked up at the pillar of creation and couldn't help but smack his lips. This thing looks so majestic no matter how many times I see it. Could it be that it leads to the stars? After looking at the pillar of creation for a while, Lin Sheng lowered his head and looked at himself. He didn't feel any strange changes, but he had a sudden epiphany. Moreover, the density of energy in this so-called dream was no less than the energy condensed by the God-level array Yun Nuoxing gave him. I will definitely make great progress if I cultivate here. Lin Sheng felt all of this in surprise. He felt that if he cultivated mystic techniques here, he should be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Buzz! Just as he was about to cultivate, the space fluctuated slightly, startling him. He turned his head and saw that a figure had appeared on the grass. He recognized the person and couldn't help but be stunned. A black trench coat, colorful long hair, and a face that could cause the downfall of countries. It was Yun Nuoxing. However, that beautiful face was filled with indifference, as if they were strangers who did not know each other. If it were any other time, Lin Sheng would happily greet Yun Nuoxing when he saw her. However, seeing her now made his expression change slightly, especially when he saw the indifference on her face. A chill surged from the bottom of his heart. Why did he have an ominous premonition when she appeared in the dream? Buzz! Yun Nuoxing slowly raised her head. There was a hint of coldness in her colorful eyes. With a wave of her hand, the netherworld ruins sword appeared in her hand. Then, waves of energy condensed into waves and rapidly condensed towards her. The violent energy fluctuations caused Lin Sheng's face to darken. Although he didn't quite understand what was going on, the high fighting spirit and the terrifying energy fluctuations made Lin Sheng feel like he was about to die. He didn't dare to be careless. He suddenly clasped his palms together and formed seals with lightning speed. A moment later, he took a deep breath and suddenly blasted out with both hands. A loud shout rang out in his heart. Imperial God Diagram. As his hands blasted out, the energy in Lin Sheng's body rapidly flowed away. Golden lines suddenly bloomed in the void in front of him. Then, they quickly connected and condensed together. In just a few seconds, they formed a golden formation that was 100 feet in size. The mysterious lines flickered with orange-gold light, revealing a very hard texture. It stood in front of him like a thick protective wall. When the Imperial God Diagram was formed, Yun Nuoxing slowly raised the netherworld ruin sword. Then, she suddenly slashed down. A soft whisper came from her mouth. Netherworld ruins, firmament, slash. Boom! The huge purplish-black sword light was like an aurora that could split the sky and earth apart, illuminating the entire world. In front of the tsunami-like sword chi, Lin Sheng and the imperial god diagram were like ants, not even a speck of dust. Lin Sheng's face darkened when he saw Yun Nuoxing use her full strength right from the start. When he sensed the real smell of death, he was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. He immediately didn't dare hesitate and wave his hands like lightning. However, just as he wanted to reinforce his defenses, the monstrous sword chi had already arrived with a rumble of annihilation. The seemingly sturdy golden formation was basically unable to block the purplish-black sword chi at all. It directly shattered into countless pieces. Lin Sheng, who was behind the golden formation, was completely exposed to the purplish-black sword chi. The enormous sword chi was simply unavoidable, causing his waving hands to suddenly freeze. At that moment, he could only widen his eyes and watch the sword chi was past his body. Boom! Within the purplish-black sword chi, Lin Sheng's body instantly melted into nothingness. The terrifying destructive power instantly destroyed his physical body and destroyed his soul. It was a kind of destruction in the truest sense of the word. After being swept into it, there was no chance of survival at all. This is death. The unparalleled sword chi surged into his body. The destructive power made him unable to even feel pain. He could only feel his life rapidly fading away. Lin Sheng's consciousness suddenly became blurry. His handsome face was very blank. At the moment when he was about to be destroyed, the dark tide rapidly attacked him and swallowed him whole. Ugh! The dark tide suddenly dissipated. Lin Sheng once again felt the breath of life, the coolness of the air, and the itchy feeling of the grass caressing his face. A sound of shock and pain came from his throat. Lin Sheng suddenly opened his eyes. At a glance, there was a blue sky. White clouds wandered in the blue ocean without a care in the world. Huff! A trace of lingering fear flashed through his pitch-black eyes. Lin Sheng suddenly clutched his chest as he panted heavily. Just now, he had truly felt the taste of death. The Nether Void Sword's destructive power had annihilated even his soul. Lin Sheng looked around blankly. When he saw the pillar of creation on the horizon, he couldn't help but be stunned. Was he still in the dream realm? He slowly raised his hand and squeezed hard. An enormous amount of energy came from his body. This energy was much stronger than when he was at his peak. Moreover, the power of his soul seemed to be stronger than before. There was a strange energy in his body that startled Lin Sheng. He quickly sat down cross-legged and sent his consciousness into his body. Then he saw a faint purplish-black energy stay in his body. Cold sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. Of course, he still remembered this energy. It was this energy that had just destroyed him, the energy of the Nether Void Sword. This is strengthening my body. Lin Sheng looked at the energy of the Nether Void Sword in his body in astonishment. At this time, the sword wasn't emitting a terrifying destructive power. It quietly hovered above his lower abdomen. The energy that flowed past was washed clean. The energy that was originally as thick as an arm was compressed to the size of a pinky finger. Moreover, the energy didn't immediately return to the energy carrier. Instead, it flowed along the meridians throughout his body. The energy that was tinged with purple scattered some purple particles. These purple particles adhered to his blood, flesh, and meridians, seemingly unintentionally strengthening his body. Although it's a good thing to become stronger. Lin Sheng smiled bitterly and scratched his head. It was definitely a good thing to be able to feel that he had become stronger, but this method was a little buzz. Before he could settle his thoughts, Lin Sheng heard another buzzing sound in the air. He was so frightened that his expression trembled. He hurriedly turned his head. As expected, Yun Nuoxing appeared in front of him again. Her expression was as cold as before. After she appeared, she raised the Nether Void Sword without saying a word. Wait. Again. Lin Sheng felt his scalp go numb when he saw the Nether Void Sword frantically gathering energy. A tragic cry came from his mouth. Before he could stand up, the destructive sword light fell from the sky again. Don't tell me it's going to last for a month. In the blink of an eye, the sword aura was right in front of him. Lin Sheng's face paled when he sensed the destructive aura once again. Before his body melted away, a bitter thought flashed across his mind, causing him to smile bitterly. The same scene happened in the dreams of the others. The violet-black sword light rose and fell, causing a series of inhuman screams to ring out in their dreams. However, they immediately came back to life. They were delighted when they felt that they had become stronger. Then, the sword light rushed over again. This cycle made them not know whether to laugh or cry. Damn it, if I don't die in a month, I'll beat that guy to death when I get out. In an instant, the same thought took root in the minds of Lin Sheng and the others. Chapter 724. In the living room, corpses of Lin Sheng and the others were strewn all over the sofa. From time to time, a little bit of energy would surge from their bodies. Yi Shi and the others were leisurely sipping tea. They were lost in thought as they looked at the sun outside the house. After sitting quietly for 2 hours, when the Empress was brewing tea again, Yi Shi slowly got up, separated Lin Sheng and the others, and threw them into the secret chamber. Then, she returned to the hall, took the teacup from the Empress, took a small sip, and heaved a long sigh of relief. So, I still don't understand why we used Brother Nua's dream spirit crystal. Yi Shi put down the teacup, took a few deep breaths, and asked doubtfully, "Can we use other things?" The Empress smiled, picked up the teapot, and poured out a stream of dark green water. When it hit the bottom of the teacup, a crisp and pleasant sound rang out, making the hall feel more lively. The dream spirit crystal has the effect of helping people to comprehend in their dreams. It's one of the more special crystals in the dream spirit crystal tree. If it's supplemented with special blood, it can even produce unexpected results. The Empress chuckled and said, "For people of our level, even if we use the dream soul crystal, we won't be able to enter a dream. We will only slowly comprehend it during this period of time, even if we have the blood of our little brother. But for those little guys, it's a rare tonic." The Empress took a sip of tea, sighed, and murmured, "In about 9 years, the demon world should be out. In the future, this world will belong to the children. Our little brother's strength is second to none among the younger generation. The younger generation of the demon world still needs him to lead the resistance, regardless of status or strength." The Empress sighed and said faintly, "We can't let him fight alone. These kids are pretty good. If they were placed in a big family, they would be considered as core disciples. Give them some time, and they will have great achievements. Let's give them a little help. If they grow up in the future, they will be of great help. Just treat it as a whim." The Empress smiled and took a sip of tea. Hearing this, Yi Shi unconcernedly curled her lips and said, "Brother Nua alone can hold up against thousands of soldiers and horses. If he wants to help, it's not something these barely passable people can help. Well, but I don't deny the existence of miracles. Let's see if they can reach a certain height in the future. Let's see if they can rule the world in 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 100,000 years." Yi Shi held her cheeks and indifferently said, "Oh, which one do you favor?" The Empress asked with a smile. She was a little surprised when she heard the word miracle. That priestess girl and that half-devil melon. Yi Shi looked outside and said casually, "The others are not bad, but I think these two are better. The priestess is from Small World. After the energy of the original world is cleansed by the pure energy of the divine world, it will cause a powerful rebound that can increase the speed of cultivation by hundreds of times. At least until she reaches the elementary god level, she will still be able to maintain a fast cultivation speed. And that girl with Intong," Yi Shi frowned slightly. She rubbed the teacup with her small hand and murmured doubtfully, "The silver-blooded Ding family, from the Ganyuan region. I've heard of this clan before. Their silver blood comes from the bloodline of an ancient divine beast. Even in the current god realm, it's a very ancient bloodline. Although they don't have any special constitution, Their bloodline is stronger than the bloodlines of ordinary constitutions. It should be comparable to the bloodlines of the 8 ancient families, Yishi said softly. But it's only comparable. The Ding family has some influence in the Ganyuan region, but in the divine prefecture, Yishi sighed helplessly. But that little girl doesn't have that kind of silver blood, right? I think her blood is bright red. The Empress was stunned for a moment. She put down the teacup and looked at Yishi. I can only say that the people of the Ding family are blind. Yishi sneered and swung her legs in boredom. There was some disdain in her voice. The silver-blooded Ding family's ancestral bloodline is actually bright red. It faded from silver to bright red when it matured. The first generation of descendants also had bright red blood. Later, as time passed, the power of the bloodline weakened and slowly turned from bright red to silver. It's just that the Ding family doesn't seem to know. It's no wonder that the Ding family has been passed down since the ancient times. It's not easy to see the shadow of the Ding family in the 139th era. Many big forces have been wiped out by the change of era and the erosion of time. The Ding family has some tricks up their sleeves, but many things have disappeared in the long river of time. Yishi sighed. Hearing this, the Empress seemed to understand something. She said, that girl's bloodline has returned to its ancestral state. Yes, it's a shame that she has been kicked out of the Ding family. If those stubborn old people knew about this, they would vomit blood and die. Yishi could not stop laughing. She jokingly said, the red blood of the Ding family can even be counted as a god spirit bloodline. In the future, they will be able to reach our level. Plus, that blood seems to have some mystery. Although it is not as good as Brother Nua's, it will not be too bad. What? Are you tempted? The Empress smiled. You don't want that girl to stay, do you? The more Ziyi listened, the more she felt that something was wrong. Especially that last sentence. She felt that there was something else in it. I have some ideas. I just want to see what happens when the ancient god-spirit bloodline, collides with other god-spirit bloodlines, Yishi admitted generously. Are you trying to find a wife for Little Star? Her jade-like hand paused for a moment, and Ziyi was speechless. That girl doesn't have that kind of feelings for Little Star, and she's also very proud. After knowing Little Stars and our identities, she won't try to get close to us. It's the same for those little fellows. Or rather, they'll intentionally or unintentionally keep their distance. It's just an idea. Just an idea. Yishi smiled and waved her hands. She sighed and said, the Nine-God Temple is so high up in the eyes of countless people. So many people can't even get close to it. Now that it has landed on these little kids, they are despised. Maybe it is because they despise it that I feel a little bit of miracle. I just don't know what will happen in the future. Yishi was a little depressed. Perhaps it's because their status is too high that it gives people a sense of distance. If they want to work hard on their own, then let them do it themselves. Little brother originally didn't have any thoughts about these things. It's just that accidents added on top of accidents. Without paying attention, he was given this title. The Empress smiled. There are responsibilities that come with it. Plus, he has 3 god weapons. I don't think it is possible for him to not care about the world. Thinking of something, Ziyi raised his head and looked at the second floor. He quietly said, originally, there were 2 godly weapons that needed to be repaired. Now, there's the Time Sand Sword, and this one is even more broken. It is broken in half. We just need to quietly protect him, Yishi quietly said. After hearing that, the Empress and Ziyi nodded. Time passed by unknowingly. In the blink of an eye, in a breath, in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, and in the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, a day would unknowingly pass by. Moonlight would shine down from the horizon, and the sun would kick the moon away. The cycle repeated itself endlessly. More than half a month had passed silently since Lin Sheng and the others were knocked out by a cup of tea. During this period of time, the atmosphere in the academy had become rather heavy while the pace of the students' activities had sped up greatly. All of them were urgently preparing for the Divine Institute exchange that was about to arrive, and they anticipated that they would be able to obtain some accomplishments during the exchange. Under this tense atmosphere, the freshman area was also very lively. There were many people going in and out. Almost every freshman could not stay still. The atmosphere in the academy had also reached a boiling point. However, under this boiling atmosphere, there was one place that was particularly quiet. It was the small palace beside the lake in the palace area. Usually, no one would visit it except for Yin Feng and the others who would occasionally come and take a look. However, as the time for the exchange with the Divine Institute was getting closer, they did not have time to visit again. However, when they saw that Yin Nuoxing and Xian had both recovered, they felt relieved. The only fly in the ointment was that Yin Nuoxing was still in a deep sleep. As early as the night of the end of the school tournament, Xian had woken up. However, when he saw that Yin Nuoxing was still in a coma, he did not leave the room. Instead, he stayed by her side and took care of her. During this half a month, he had not left the bed for even an inch. Even when he cultivated, he stayed in bed to cultivate. The same was true for Feng. Even though both of them knew that Yin Nuoxing had already come out of her coma, the meditation of the Thousand Dreams Heart Sutra had automatically activated. At this time, there was no need for them to stay by her side continuously. They did not leave and quietly waited for her to wake up. Little Bing Er slept beside Yin Nuoxing. Like her, she had also slept for half a month. Furthermore, she seemed to be just sleeping. Feng could not tell what was wrong with her. After half a month, the Empress also left. When she left, she also took in Lixin and Jingyu with her. The power of the origin left by the two was enough to shelter Yin Nuoxing from her sleep. Moreover, Yishi and Zai were still there. There was not much meaning for them to stay. They followed the Empress back to her residence. It was said that she was going to explore southern Yuan. The huge palace suddenly became empty. In the hall, Zai, Yishi, Lan Xen Kai Xia, and Xiao Bai looked at each other in boredom. For a time, they also found a little boring and there was nothing to do. In this boring waiting, another half a month passed by quickly. When the morning came, a vast ancient bell tolled, majestically spreading throughout the Yuanguang Academy. Dong! The melodious bell tolled in every corner of the Yuanguang Academy. Every student who heard the bell stood up abruptly and cast their sharp gazes toward the center of the Yuanguang Academy, the place where the ancient bell tolled. In an instant, the huge Yuanguang Academy was revived from the dead silence. Its vitality continued to rise until the entire academy was boiling. Countless students soared into the sky with excited expressions. The entire academy was filled with an excited atmosphere because today was finally the day of the countless God-grade academies in the world of the gods. It was also the day when the exchange between the divine academies officially began. When the scorching sun hung high in the sky, the atmosphere in the Yuanguang Academy was as lively as the sun. As far as the eye could see, the square in the center of the academy was filled with people. At the foot of the giant sword mountain, the square was 100,000 feet long and wide. At this moment, it was actually filled with people. Even the elders of the academy were floating in the sky. Countless people were looking at this scene with excited expressions. Space gate open. At the center of the plaza, an empty space with a circumference of 10,000 feet appeared. Yin Feng, Luo Feng, and Luo Feng, as well as a few elders, simultaneously formed hand seals, after which they smashed their hands together. The overflowing spatial strength caused the surrounding space to become incomparably distorted. It was as if several thousand enormous whirlpools had been formed in the air. The boundless spatial strength caused the students to roar loudly. OM! A moment later, Yin Feng and the others changed their hand seals, and the thousands of huge vortexes suddenly enlarged. From 1,000, they gradually scattered into tens of thousands. Soon after, they condensed into more than 100,000 spatial vortexes. They extended from the ground to the sky, forming a huge circle. Soon after, the hundreds of thousands of spatial vortexes trembled slightly and slowly turned into many spatial light screens. One could even see the scene within the light screens. It was an ancient academy that stood tall and upright. The day has finally arrived. In the sky above the square, Shui Lingfeng involuntarily chuckled as he looked at the several 100,000 spatial screens. The last time he had participated, he was still a small student. This time, he was already standing at the top of the Farlight Academy. Why? Which academy do you plan to go and cause a ruckus? To one side, Zhao Wenyao faintly smiled as he patted his platinum robes. He looked at the spatial screens in the square, a fiery passion surging in his eyes. The robes were white and gold intertwined. The Farlight Academy's emblem was on the back and sleeves of the robes. It was like a wisp of golden light on the horizon. At the center of the golden light was a large golden hall. It was just like the ancient and majestic light divine hall, causing one to feel deep veneration. Oh, I've heard that there are quite a few girls in Sea King Academy. Shui Lingfeng seriously pondered for a while. The words that he inadvertently blurted out caused black lines to appear on Zhao Wenyao's face. When did this fellow start thinking about girls? Why don't you go to Heavenly Phoenix Academy? It's full of girls. It's said that male students are rare creatures. There are only 1,000 males out of 1,000,000 students. Zhao Wenyao softly said as he pointed at a fiery red spatial screen below. Wow, even if we split it evenly, each person will get 1,000 girls. How enviable. Hearing this, Shui Lingfeng could not help but laugh. He then nodded seriously and said, then let's go there first. Let's go hunt for girls. You? Zhao Wenyao staggered and almost fell from the sky. He looked at Shui Lingfeng with a black face and said in a low voice, are you serious? Ha ha. Shui Lingfeng laughed without saying a word. This caused Zhao Wenyao's cheeks to twitch uncontrollably. He knew that this fellow's brain must have gone haywire. He really wanted to go hunt for girls. Let's go. Destination, Heavenly Phoenix Academy. Target. Shui Lingfeng brushed his long hair. He looked very unruly and handsome. Who knew how many girls would fall in love with him? He waved his hand and laughed. Let's go pick up girls. After he finished speaking, he did not wait for Zhao Wenyao's reply and rushed down with a string of loud laughter. You bastard! Zhao Wenyao roared in anger. He fiercely smacked his lips and chased after Shui Lingfeng. The two of them rushed into the red light screen together. The countless students below roared when they saw the two in front attacking so quickly. Soon after, countless figures soared into the sky from all directions, surging towards the destinations they had long thought of, charging into the many light screens. In the middle of the plaza, Yin Feng and the rest wiped off their sweat. They looked at the countless students rushing into the sky and could not help but smile. Every time this exchange was held, the academy would be in an uproar. The students would also wear the academy uniform, which was rarely used, to symbolize that they were representing the Farlight Academy. Yin Feng and the others smiled as they looked at the people streaming into the light screen and the people streaming out. With a flash of their bodies, they instantly disappeared from the square. The door had already opened. The rest would be up to them to compete for it. Chapter 725. As more than 100,000 light screens were opened, the fiery atmosphere was completely ignited. Along with loud cheers, it was as if a war song was being played. The students were sent to the light screens one after another, giving them the courage to win every battle. At the same time, the students of the other academies were also coming out of the light screens. On the other hand, the other students of the Divine Institute that appeared on the screen of light turned their gazes in unison. After that, they simultaneously fixed their gazes on the enormous sword peak. Their fierce gazes searched for the figure they wanted to see. There were many figures on the sword peak today, and the names of the academies were marked on the figures of the students. That was the location of the academies they were currently in, making it easier for experts to find experts. When countless people charged out of the screens of light and encountered the countless students of Longguang Academy in the square, the atmosphere was on the verge of erupting. Immediately, battle after battle erupted. They fought from the sky to the ground, and from the ground to the ground. The energy of the 8 elements surged and boiled in the academy. While the battle at the Farlight Academy was in full swing, many pairs of eyes, which had been shut for a month, suddenly opened within the secret chamber of the small palace. Their gazes, which contained a glint, cut through the air and waves of ear-piercing screeches sounded. A couple of frightening energy ripples were like huge dragons that were slowly awakening from their slumber. However, the small palace was sealed by a barrier, and the outside world was unable to sense the huge change within it. Looks like they've all woken up. The timing is just right. In the hall, Yishi slowly put down the book that was half her size. She raised her head and glanced at the shaking palace as she spoke indifferently. "Oh yeah, the little girl with the silver pupils you've taken a fancy to has reached the demigod level." Z took a sip of tea and smiled faintly. "She's been stuck at the peak of the demonic rank for some time now, right? She's been accumulating strength for a long time, so it's normal for her to break through with the help of the Dream Soul Crystal." Yishi chuckled in a tone that was completely unexpected. Lin Xing slowly opened his black eyes as a sharp light flashed through them. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He clenched his fists and could not help but grin. Half-demon rank 8. After a month of cultivating and comprehending the Tao in the dream, his strength had actually crossed over to the third cycle. Moreover, during that month of cultivation, it wasn't just his cultivation that had changed. He had also gradually gotten used to the sword chi of the Nethervoid sword. Later on, the Yun Nuashing had also changed to the Ling Hong sword and other divine weapons, using the destructive power to constantly cleanse his body, making his physical strength countless times stronger. At this moment, he was confident that even if he encountered a third or fourth seal demon rank powerhouse again, under the condition that he did not use his trump card, he could rely on a magic array to contend with his own strength for a period of time. If he laid down a killing array, he might even be able to kill him completely. If he encountered Bai Yuya again, he would not be as helpless as before. He slowly raised his black eyes. His gaze seemed to pass through the hall, through the formation, and into the academy. He saw the energy that filled the sky, and he immediately knew that the Divine Institute exchange had begun. "Looks like I haven't woken up too late." Lin Sheng took a deep breath and jumped down from the stone bed in the secret room. He stretched his body, and the sound of bones joining together rang out from his body, as if he had pressed on some mechanism. "I wonder how everyone is doing." Lin Sheng smiled, and slowly opened the stone door and walked out of the secret room. Thinking back to that month of cultivation, he really wanted to find a certain person to fight, even though he would most likely be abused. When Lin Sheng arrived at the hall, Ding Mingyu and the others had already been sitting there for a while. When they saw him walk in, they all turned around and smiled at him. Lin Sheng returned a smile and looked at everyone with some surprise. He wasn't the only one who had benefited. Even Yi Qinglian had advanced to the first seal demon rank. It looked like everyone had benefited greatly from that dream, especially Ding Mingyu. He could clearly sense a terrifying threat from her. Clearly, she was the one who had benefited the most this time. Lin Sheng casually sat down beside Yi Qinglian. When he saw Yi Qinglian staring at him in boredom, he could not help but awkwardly scratch his head and ask, "Where's Brother Yin?" "He's still sleeping." Ziyi covered her mouth and let out a long yawn. She then waved her hand and said, "The Divine Institute exchange has already begun. You can go first. Little Star will probably take some time. If it's short, it'll take half an hour. If it's long, it might take a few days." Lin Sheng was just about to nod when his gaze met Xuan Mu and the others. He paused for a moment and then smiled. "Wait a while. I've just finished cultivating, so I'll rest for a while. There's something I need to talk to Brother Yin about." Ding Mingyu and the others all nodded. Yishi couldn't help but burst out in laughter when she saw their looks. "It seems that you guys have been badly abused by Brother Nuo in your dreams and want to vent your anger on him." Lin Sheng and the others were stunned when they heard this. They scratched their heads awkwardly and nodded. They never thought that their thoughts would be seen through. Do as you please. You can't beat Little Star anyway." Z shook her head helplessly and sighed softly. She had bluntly poured a bucket of cold water on them, causing Lin Sheng and the others to sigh speechlessly. It seemed to make sense when they thought about it. Let's wait. It'll be a little boring if he's not around. Mei blinked and smiled faintly. Lin Sheng and the others smiled and nodded. He really could not be absent from such a grand event. However, they waited until late at night. When night fell, the Far Light Academy, which had been bustling for an entire day, gradually calmed down. The battles also slowly came to an end. Those from the other academies either returned to their own academies or found a remote place within the Far Light Academy to rest and recover from the huge exhaustion they had expended during the day. The small palace beside the lake still appeared cold and cheerless. There was no sign of life within a radius of 10 miles. Even the other palaces were pitch black. Only the small palace beside the lake was lit up, becoming the only source of light within a radius of 10 miles. Moonlight quietly fell in the pitch-black room, silently expelling some of the darkness in the room. The clear and bright light landed on the spacious bed, illuminating the two slender figures lying on it, covering the two of them with a thin silver veil. The azure light passed through the window and landed on the bed, slowly moving. After a long while, it finally shone on the other bed, illuminating the beautiful face. The slightly cool moonlight caused the air to be somewhat chilly. The pair of eyes that had been tightly shut for more than a month finally trembled slightly under the moonlight. Soon after, they slowly opened. When the eyes opened, the colorful light caused the moonlight to shrink slightly. The dazzling colorful light illuminated the room. However, it only lasted for an instant before the light shrunk back into the eyes. The room once again returned to darkness. The moonlight also continued to sprinkle down as though nothing had happened. There was still some confusion in the colorful eyes. She stared at the dark ceiling. Her head was like paste, and she did not recover for a long time. After opening her eyes like this for a long time, the confusion in her colorful eyes gradually disappeared. Yin Nuoxing completely woke up. She moved her fingers slightly and took a deep breath, after which she felt that something was not quite right. My body is so heavy. Yin Nuoxing opened her eyes in confusion. After sleeping for a month, the feeling of weakness should have disappeared. There was indeed a wave of energy flowing in her body. Why did she feel so heavy? Yin Nuoxing's body moved slightly, and she came to a sudden realization. She lowered her head slightly, and only then did she see that there was a warm and fragrant soft jade on her body. His originally somewhat slender body was currently being used as a bedboard for a certain girl. Her delicate body was curled up, and her entire weight was pressed on his body. It would be strange if he did not feel heavy. The person in his arms seemed to have sensed that he had moved slightly. Her head, that was resting on his chest, moved slightly. She shifted her position and rested her head on his shoulder. A soft sound of sleep came from her throat. However, this sound was very unfamiliar, causing Yin Nuoxing to be slightly surprised. She lowered her head and opened her eyes. With the help of the faint moonlight, she saw that the long bluish-gold hair that covered the bed was like a blooming devil's snare flower. It wrapped around his neck, arms, and body tightly. It was as though she was worried that he would run away. Suddenly, his mind began to churn, causing Yin Nuoxing to be startled. His head hurt a little, and in his churning mind, an image appeared, a pitch-black night sky and an ice-cold blue moon. It seemed to have happened not long ago. Yin Nuoxing was lying on the bed. Little Bing Er, who was beside him, had unknowingly woken up. Her bluish-gold eyes were bright and full of expression in the dark room as she stared at him on the bed. After a long while, she slowly climbed off the bed. Her body began to emit a rich bluish-gold, strange light. Under the influence of this bluish-gold light, her large watery eyes became as bright and moving as sapphires. Buzz, as the bluish-gold light spread, the purple dress on little Bing Er's petite body suddenly burst open. It turned into pieces of cloth that drifted to the ground. Her petite body quickly became taller in the dark night. Her long bluish-gold hair also grew longer like wild grass. In the end, it was so long that it curled up on the bed. As the light faded away, a snow-white and jade-like naked body was revealed. She had a tall and lithe figure. Her sparkling jade-like feet touched the ice-cold floor lightly. Her pair of jade-like legs were long and slender, round and firm. Above her was a small waist that was so slender that it could not be grasped with one hand. Her snow-white breasts were proudly exposed in the air. On her curvaceous body, her white and flawless skin revealed a faint pinkish color, with a white light gently flowing around it. On her delicate little face, her thin lips were as tender as rose petals. Her small nose was perky, and her long icy blue eyelashes were trembling slightly. Mei Mao's long and narrow bluish gold hair revealed a delicateness that caused one's heart to ripple. There was also a faint majesty within it. Her picturesque eyebrows were slightly bent. Her slightly frowning appearance made her appear very lovely and moving, causing one's desire to protect her to increase greatly. She was just like a weak little empress. Yin Nuoxing looked at this memory. Then her beautiful face suddenly turned red. Wouldn't that mean that he was now? However, she did not have to think too much about it. In the image, light surged on little Bing Air's delicate body. Bluish gold clothes condensed and immediately covered the exposed spring scenery. However, under the wrapping of the clothes, the originally plump curves were highlighted, making her body appear even more slender. Her tight, slender waist and sexy curves were enough to cause one's heart to beat. Little Bing Air gently stretched out her jade-like hand. Her slender, jade-like hand flickered with a jade-like luster. She gathered up her messy long hair, which fell to her heels and curled up on the ground. Her originally wavy long hair appeared slightly wavy at the bottom part of her golden hair, while her long, icy blue hair was like a waterfall above her head. The beautiful girl in front of him stood on the ground for a long time without saying a word. The wildness in Mei Mao's bluish gold hair was completely restrained. Like a pair of eyes, she turned her head and looked at Feng, and Xian, who were sleeping soundly on the other bed. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly, and some emotions flashed past her eyes. Then, her jade-like hand gently pulled the blanket over the two girls. Only then did she turn her head and gently climb onto the bed. Her slender and delicate body was a little taller than Yin Nuoxing, but when she curled up, she looked like a little bird relying on its owner. As little Bing Air obediently curled up on Yin Nuoxing's body, her long bluish gold hair also came to life like small snakes and gently wrapped around the latter's body. That strange and comfortable feeling made his sleeping expression slightly relax. "I'm sorry." Her voice was clear and pleasant to the ear, like a mountain spring flowing past in a quiet place. The soft echo of her voice on the stone wall carried some weakness and tiredness, causing a strange fluctuation to appear in the room at night. Yin Nuoxing was a little stunned. She did not expect that her first sentence would be these 3 words. Moreover, why did she say these 3 words? She did not understand. Chapter 726. Night Moon. In the room of the small palace, the moonlight was cool and gentle. Yin Nuoxing gently moved his wrists and looked at the ceiling with a stiff gaze. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He stretched out his hands stiffly and gently pulled away the long bluish gold hair that was wrapped around his arms. He didn't even dare to use too much strength because he was afraid that he would wake up the little girl who was curled up in his arms. "Gently, gently, be careful." A stiff voice sounded in his heart. Yin Nuoxing slowly pulled at the long hair on his body. After 15 minutes, he finally managed to free his hands and let out a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to pull off the long hair on his body, the long hair that he had just pulled off suddenly curled up. Yin Nuoxing was shocked. Before he could react, the long hair wrapped around his entire body tightly. Even his 5 fingers were tightly curled up, giving him a fright. "Damn it, I can't run away." Letting out a bitter laugh in his heart, Yin Nuoxing let out an almost undetectable sigh. Soon after, he felt the person in his embrace move, causing him to be startled. Lowering his head, he saw little Bing slowly stretching her swan-like snow-white neck, shifting her pretty face to the same position as his. opening her beautiful blue-gold eyes. They seemed to sparkle in the dusky room. As their eyes met, the air seemed to have frozen. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. Why did this girl wake up? Could it be that she noticed him when he was pulling her hair? Bing Air. Yun Nuoxing blinked and called out softly. Little Bing Air tilted her head and stared at him with her bluish-gold eyes. She didn't blink for a long time and only said softly after a long while, "Dad?" Cough. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He suddenly rolled his eyes and tried his best to suppress his internal injuries. He said angrily, "Firstly, I'm not even 34 years old this year. Can you not call me Dad? Secondly, forget it, let's just say it. I'm not your father. I'm just a wandering scavenger. I accidentally found you and accidentally hatched you." Yin Nuoxing sighed. Although he didn't know why he had to say this, he felt that it was better to say it so that she wouldn't complicate their relationship. However, it wasn't a problem for her to call him that. To her, he should be like a brother or a father. However, deep down, he really resisted the identity of a father. He couldn't accept it now. In the future, perhaps he would only be able to accept it after a long time. Hearing this, Bing Air's bright eyes became dazed for a moment. However, it was only for a moment, so Yun Nuoxing didn't see it clearly. After that, Bing Air lowered her head. Mei Mao looked a little sad and sad. Seeing her sad look, Yun Nuoxing felt a little sorry for her. He laughed dryly and said, Bing Air, let me hear you call me Big Brother." "I can't be a father. Even if I am, I won't be a competent father. Being a big brother is not a problem." Yun Nuoxing smiled helplessly. With his free and unrestrained personality, he couldn't play this role well before he understood the responsibility that a father should have. To be honest, he felt a little helpless in his heart. Mythical beasts had very high spiritual intelligence. Bing Air was born in a human form. At this moment, she had transformed into the body of a normal adult. Although she was still a child according to her age, in reality, her spiritual intelligence and spiritual intelligence were much higher than adult demonic beasts and magical beasts. Otherwise, this girl wouldn't have changed the way she addressed him from mother to father. How could her spiritual intelligence be low when her eyes were sparkling with spiritual light? Bing Air heard this and gently raised her head. Her blue-gold, Mei Mao stared at Yun Nuoxing closely. This glance made Yun Nuoxing feel helpless and distressed. In the few seconds that she lowered her head, why did she look like she was about to cry? Don't cry. Did I say something that made you unhappy? Yun Nuoxing felt helpless when he saw that she was about to cry. He picked up the feeling that he had just gotten rid of. It was better to treat her as a 5 or 6-year-old girl. After he finished speaking, he didn't see any reaction from Bing Air, even after a while. They looked at each other for a long time. When he saw that the water vapor in Bing Air's Mei Mao was getting thicker and thicker and was about to fall out, Yun Nuoxing was finally defeated. He reached out his hand that was wrapped in Bing Air's long hair and patted her head. He laughed bitterly. After a while, he helplessly smiled and said, Okay, I know. Call me whatever you want." When Bing Air heard this, a strange light flashed across Mei Mao's eyes. She gently nodded. However, that sad expression didn't seem like it would disappear anytime soon. This gave Yun Nuoxing a huge headache. After a while, Bing Air gently lowered her head and pressed her cheek against Yun Nuoxing's chest. She gently reached out her jade-like hands and wrapped them around his neck. She hugged him very tightly and took a light breath as if she was smelling his scent. The bitter smile on Yun Nuoxing's face became even more pronounced. This was great. Forget about the child. This time, he had to take care of the older child. When he lowered his head and saw that Bing Air had her Mei Mao closed and looked very peaceful, Yun Nuoxing hesitated for a moment. Then, he reached out his hand and gently placed it on Bing Air's slender waist. He used a little strength to hug her tightly and sighed softly in his heart. "Daddy, I'm sorry. When I was advancing, I used up all your energy." An apologetic whisper came from his arms. Originally, Yun Nuoxing was gently patting Bing Air's back. However, When he heard this voice, his body suddenly stiffened. His mouth opened in shock, and the expression on his pretty face became particularly interesting. So, the culprit who made him so weak that he would rather die was her? Feng, and Little White were both mythological beasts, but they couldn't sense Little Bing Heir's advancement. It seemed that he had given her some function in some of the divine items. Speechless, Yin Nuoxing opened his mouth. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry inside. Then, he softly said, "Forget it. It's all over now. Anyway, there's nothing else. Don't worry about it." Hearing this, Bing Heir, who was in his arms, gently shook her head. He was startled and lowered his head. Then, he heard Bing Heir's voice, which was as soft as a mosquito's sound. "Daddy's bloodline is awakening. I should have suppressed the advancement a little, but I couldn't. Under the two pressures, that's why Daddy was so weak." Yin Nuoxing was startled. Then, he suddenly understood. No wonder the blood he spat out at that time seemed to be more golden. His palm gently patted Bing Heir's back to comfort her. Then, he took a deep breath. His consciousness entered his heart and checked. He saw that at this moment, his blood was 70 to 80% golden. There was only a little red left. He could feel that his current bloodline was many times more powerful than his previous bloodline. The power it could provide was also incomparable. At this moment, he was confident that even if he didn't use any other methods, he could probably send a demigod rank 9 expert flying with just his physical strength. If he met Xian Yuan, Yin Mo, and the others again, you wouldn't even need to use a trace of light element or star power. The gradual awakening of the God Spirit bloodline also made his body more perfect, whether it was his body or his soul. Moreover, there were many memory fragments in his mind. Yin Nuoxing looked at the extra memory fragments in the memory star field. They were like huge meteorites. They didn't come into contact with the memory star field, nor did they merge with the many memories. He couldn't help but reach out and touch them. A cold touch came from his palm. He could faintly feel that these memory fragments were different from the frozen memory core. If he wanted to unlock these memory fragments, he only needed to inject a large amount of energy. Sitting cross-legged in the memory star field, Yin Nuoxing looked at the thousands of floating memory fragments. He scratched his head, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Let's give it a try." After talking to himself for a while, Yin Nuoxing stood up and walked in front of a gray memory fragment. This memory fragment was only the size of a fist. Compared to the memory fragments that were a few dozen feet large, it should be easier to unlock. Taking a deep breath, he gently held the gray stone that was the size of a fist. His mind moved, and a vast amount of star power flowed out of his soul's arm. Then, it poured into the gray stone. Faced with such a large amount of star power pouring in, the fist-sized stone only lit up with a dim light. It didn't move much. However, Yin Nuoxing was not in a rush. This large group of gray meteorites had appeared with the awakening of the bloodline. They contained the secrets of the ancient bloodline. He thought it wouldn't be easy to unlock them. The infusion of the power of the stars lasted for about an hour, and with this seemingly endless infusion, Yin Nuoxing's face twitched. He did not expect that it would not be so easy to be so difficult. This was only a fragment the size of a fist, and there was a large one beside it that was dozens of feet in size. In the distance, there seemed to be a huge meteorite that was dozens of miles in length and width. Just as Yin Nuoxing's imagination was running wild, the gray stone that had not had much of a reaction suddenly emitted a soft cracking sound, causing him to involuntarily cry out in surprise. Although this sound was very weak, it clearly landed in Yin Nuoxing's ears, causing him to shift his gaze towards the gray stone in his hands in pleasant surprise. At this moment, there were small golden cracks on the surface of the gray stone. The cracking sound from before seemed to have come from the cracks. Moreover, there were golden runes on the surface of the stone. They were very mysterious and complicated. Seeing that there seemed to be hope, Yin Nuoxing finally let go of the worry in his heart. He was speechless as he glanced at the meteorite that was a few dozen miles wide. Then he took a deep breath and mobilized all the star power in his body. It surged out from every corner of his body like a tide. Finally, under his control, it poured into the gray stone. As more and more star force poured in, the cracks on the surface of the gray stone gradually increased. Inadvertently, a circle had already been formed. Moreover, the golden light that burst out from the cracks also became more and more intense, and the golden runes also became more and more brilliant. When half of the star power in his body had been extracted, Yin Nuashing habitually increased the rate of star power pouring in. Suddenly, he realized that the absorption effect of the gray stone seemed to have disappeared. He calmed down the surging star power in his body and stared intently at the gray stone. Then he saw that the cracks on the gray stone had already covered the entire stone. The brilliant golden light was a little dazzling, causing Yin Nuashing to hurriedly narrow his eyes and secretly peek through a small crack. Bang! Just as Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes, the gray stone suddenly burst open. The brilliant golden light illuminated the entire memory star region with golden light. It was as if a star had been lit up. The dazzling light caused him to hurriedly close his eyes. After waiting like this for a period of time, Yin Nuashing felt that the light outside his eyelids was not as intense as before. He hurriedly opened his eyes. The gray stone had already burst into pieces. What replaced it was an image that was flickering with golden light. A large patch of golden light lingered around the image. There seemed to be something churning on the image. It looked like some kind of ancient text. These densely packed golden words made Yin Nuashing feel dizzy. He hurriedly turned his eyes away. His palms randomly swept in front of him. He accidentally touched the ball of golden light and reached in. As Yin Nuashing accidentally reached in with his palms, the brilliant golden image shook violently. Then it squirmed and slowly melted into his palms as if it had turned into liquid. The sudden disappearance of the light stunned Yin Nuashing. He hurriedly turned his eyes and saw that the golden liquid had melted into his palms. Then it rapidly flew along his meridians. It was unknown if Yin Nuashing was scared out of his wits or if he was too calm. He opened his eyes wide as he watched the golden liquid rush through his meridians. In the end, it crashed into his mind, causing his head to swell. Following that, the golden light turned into an excessively large amount of information. It was as if an ocean of information had descended from the sky, causing his mind to churn. Ayo! The churning in his mind caused Yin Nuashing to suddenly hold his head and howl. The feeling of something being forcefully poured into his mind made his head swell. Even his soul felt a slight, stinging pain from this feeling. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. It suddenly disappeared after the howl. It disappeared so quickly that Yin Nuashing even thought that it was an illusion. Huff! In the room, Yin Nuashing suddenly opened his eyes and slowly panted for a while. A drop of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, causing him to be slightly startled. He did not expect that he would be shaken out of the memory world by that thing. After panting for a while, Yin Nuashing closed his eyes again. His mind quickly flew into his mind to search for the golden light from before. Just as his mind entered his mind, Yin Nuashing was startled. The resplendent golden light formed a huge line of words that fell from the sky and wrapped around him in a huge circle. The golden words that were formed by countless golden lights were so bright that it was dazzling. Looking at them made his eyes hurt. After rubbing his eyes, Yin Nuashing opened his evil spirit eye and filtered through the dazzling light. He immediately saw the words wrapped in the golden light. After seeing the words, Yin Nuashing was slightly startled. Those were words from the mythological era, the bloodline of the ancient gods. The memory fragments that are passed down in the bloodline are also written in the language of the gods. Looking at the huge golden words that fell from the sky, Yin Nuashing could not help but take a deep breath. The golden words revealed a terrifying sense of majesty. According to Yin Nuashing's thoughts, if it were not for the memory fragments in his bloodline, he would not be able to see these words. Fire of the soul. Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at the 4 big words above him. He was stunned. Then he lowered his head and looked at the words that formed a circle around him. After he finished reading, he raised his head and scratched his head in astonishment. Energy mystic arts? Rather than calling it a mystic art, it's more like the experience left behind from cultivation. But it doesn't seem like it's a cultivation that focuses on the use of energy. Oh. Yin Nuashing scratched his cheek and was slightly moved. The spiritual, godly physique was proficient in the use of energy and spiritual items. However, the proficiency was only at a certain level. He also dared to guarantee that in terms of the use of energy, he was definitely not comparable to Yi Shi and Princess Jean. He was not even comparable to Lan Xiner. The spiritual, godly physique only gave him a higher step. It allowed him to have a very high starting line and better access to higher realms. Even with the heaven-defying effect of this physique, it could not allow him to play with energy to reach the acme of perfection. The initial God realm focuses more on the use of energy and the control of energy. Every time I advance, my understanding of energy will become more thorough. After the half-demon realm, I will also begin to come into contact with this knowledge. However, I will not be able to see it as thoroughly as the initial God realm experts. The fire of the soul has a unique analysis of energy. It could be said that the use of energy has reached the acme of perfection. Cultivating the fire of the soul will allow me to use energy better. Woo 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 woo. Grade, divine grade. AI, it's only natural. After Yin Nuashing finished reading the introduction, he looked at the grade again. When he saw the two words divine grade, he could not help but laugh helplessly. However, before he could laugh, he was stunned. This was because he saw that there was another word behind the divine grade. Grade, divine grade. Sage grade? When he saw the two words behind the divine grade, Yin Nuashing was also stunned. Among the mystic arts that he knew, the highest grade was the divine grade. In the eyes of outsiders, it was equivalent to a legendary grade. Even the transcendental forces might not necessarily have items like the divine grade mystic arts. However, today he saw a strange grade. Could it be the later God realm grade? When this thought flashed through his mind, Yin Nuashing was shocked. Chapter 727. In the room, a burst of colorful light suddenly lit up. However, it only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. Moonlight once again crept in through the window. After the colorful light dimmed, Yin Nuashing, who was on the bed near the outside of the room, slowly opened his eyes. A bright light flashed through his colorful eyes. That pair of gorgeous eyes seemed a little different, but he couldn't pinpoint the specifics. It just seemed a little more lively. Phew! Yin Nuashing let out a long breath. He raised his head and looked at the moonlight outside through the window. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he also felt that the world outside was a little different from before. How should he put it? It was as if the heaven and earth energy and elemental energy that were floating between heaven and earth had a life of their own. Is this how a strong God looks at the energy of the outside world? Looking at the energy that was filled with spirituality, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but laugh. The strength of a strong God wasn't without reason. Their understanding of energy and their use of energy weren't something that mortals like him could understand. Only when standing in the same realm could one understand why they could use the same energy to launch a destructive attack. Yin Nuashing moved slightly. The feeling of restraint on his body had disappeared. He lowered his head and looked at his body. Bing Air was snuggled up in his arms and sleeping soundly. Seeing this, he couldn't help but smile gently. He lowered his head and kissed the girl's smooth forehead. Then, he quietly got out of bed and covered Bing Air with a blanket. He looked at Feng, and Xian, who were sleeping soundly, and then pushed the door open and left. Soft voices came from the hall. When Yin Nuashing heard those familiar voices, he couldn't help but smile. Under the dim light, he slowly walked down the stairs. In the bright hall, Yi Shi and the others suddenly heard footsteps coming from the stairs. They hurriedly raised their heads and saw Yin Nuashing walking down the stairs. Their eyes lit up. Brother Nuo. Little Starry. As soon as Yin Nuashing appeared, Yi Shi, Ziyi, and the others looked over. The joy that had just surged in their hearts quickly turned into astonishment when they saw Yun Nuoxing's appearance. Lin Sheng and the others also turned around and looked at the staircase. Just as they were about to say something, they were all stunned. They stared blankly at Yun Nuoxing, who was gradually approaching them. A hint of surprise and astonishment flashed across their eyes. What? Is there a flower on my face? Yun Nuoxing was also stunned when she saw their dazed expressions. She wiped her face with her palm and placed it in front of her to take a look, but she didn't see anything on her palm. Ah, I can speak now. Hearing her own muttering, Yun Nuoxing touched her throat in surprise. It seemed that the time for the backlash had passed. Lin Sheng shuddered when he heard this. He laughed dryly and scratched his face with an awkward expression. Brother Yun, we originally wanted to teach you a lesson, but it seems that it won't be easy to do so now. What the hell? Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and walked over to sit beside Yishi. She picked up her teacup and took a sip. Then, when she bent over, she was stunned. The expression on her face instantly became incomparably interesting. Uffed. Yishi was still pouring tea for him. When she saw him suddenly stop, she also raised her head. Then, she saw the drastic change in his expression. Finally, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. After hearing this laughter, Lin Sheng and the others awkwardly turned their gazes away. Ding Mingyu and Jun Luoyi's faces were slightly red. Mei Mao revealed a slightly moved expression. Ziyi, Lan Exine, and Ziyi rested their jade-like hands on their chins and calmly sized up Yun Nuoxing. There was no other reason but because at that very moment, Yun Nuoxing was wearing Ziyan's purple dress. The purple pleated skirt was decorated with a few fresh flowers, and he even wore dark purple knee-high socks. Paired with the dullness on his devastatingly beautiful little face, it made him look incomparably beautiful and moving. Come on, the cross-dresser has appeared again. Xiaobai shook her legs and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yishi shook her head helplessly. She didn't need to think too much to know that this was Ziyan and Feng Er's masterpiece. Yun Nuoxing wouldn't obediently wear a dress and knee-length socks. He even meticulously combed his hair and braided it. The two girls were most likely bored and took advantage of Yun Nuoxing's deep sleep to torture him. However, it had to be said that he originally had a girl's appearance. Coupled with this outfit, this hair accessory, and that earring, he was quite beautiful. After a while, Yun Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he tugged at his dress. He shook his head and sighed. He picked up his teacup and took a sip. His calm appearance surprised Xiao Bai and Yishi. You've accepted this setting so quickly? Xiao Bai's tiger eyes widened. He shook his body and transformed into a palm-sized white-blue tiger cub. He jumped onto Yun Nuoxing's head and lay down. He said in surprise, I thought you were going to fight them to the death. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and said helplessly, in the future, we'll be living together for at least a few 100 billion years, if not trillions of years. Will this kind of thing be rare? I can't possibly find two girls to fight with my life every time I wake up and find that I've been cough. Yun Nuoxing used Zai's words and smiled faintly. If you can't bear to teach them a lesson, then admit it honestly. Zai couldn't help but roll her eyes when she heard this familiar line. She glanced at him and said jokingly, but this outfit is quite fitting. Just wear it like this. As you wish. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He looked at Zai with hidden bitterness, then agreed in a fit of pique. Puffed. Lin Sheng and Yi Qinglian couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of water. They wiped the corners of their mouths and looked at each other silently. They smiled bitterly. This time, she was really the #1 goddess on the goddess list. Cough. Ding Mingyu coughed dryly. The blush on her face was suppressed. Mei Mao looked at Yun Nuoxing with interest. She smiled faintly and said, Junior. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, Jun Luo suddenly moved closer to her ear and whispered something, causing Ding Mingyu's face to turn slightly red. After a moment of bashfulness, she glared at her with her beautiful eyes. Jun Luo laughed tenderly and looked at Ding Mingyu encouragingly. Ding Mingyu hesitated for a while before coughing dryly. she said with a red face. Little girl, tomorrow we'll go to the other schools to challenge. I want to invite you. Yin Nuashing didn't say anything when Chuan Mu and the others started to curse. They all lowered their heads and didn't say anything. They only felt that their worldview was collapsing bit by bit. Chuan Mu and Lin Sheng smiled bitterly. When they first met at the spiritual light tower, they felt that this junior was like a girl. Now that he had changed into a dress, Yin Nuashing looked at them speechlessly. He didn't think about what they were thinking. He looked at Ding Mingyu and nodded with a smile. He said, "You guys lead the way. I'll smash the place. We're going to have a friendly exchange. We're not really going to smash the place." Lin Sheng reminded weakly. "I know. It's an exchange. If the exchange is friendly, then everything will be fine. If it's not, then well, right?" Yin Nuashing grinned. That evil smile on his beautiful face made everyone have mixed feelings. "Well, leave the demigod level to me. The demigod level ones, no matter what level they are, throw them to Lin Sheng. You guys split the rest. How about that?" Yin Nuashing looked around and smiled. He distributed the rest casually. "Are you treating me as if I don't exist?" Ding Mingyu glared at him when she heard that. After all, she was a demigod-level expert now. How could she let her junior make the first move? Congratulations on advancing to the demigod level, senior. However, you should just stand at the back obediently and be a quiet, beautiful girl." Yin Nuashing smiled and rubbed his hands. He said, "Leave the fighting to the men. Come and help us when we can't handle it anymore." "You." Ding Mingyu glared at him angrily when she heard that. She gently raised her hand and a faint bolt of lightning quietly condensed in her palm. She glared at Yin Nuashing and said angrily, "Why don't we exchange a few blows first?" Although the blossoming lightning did not reveal a huge amount of energy, Chuan Mu and the others could not help but feel their cheeks twitch when they saw it. They had not been at the peak of the demigod level for long. They were a little regretful that they had not been able to use the Dream Soul Crystal to step into the demigod level. At this moment, when they felt the energy that Ding Mingyu was emitting, their hearts palpitated. Indeed, a single step could make a huge difference. It was likely that Ding Mingyu could deal with them effortlessly. Clack! Yin Nuashing smiled faintly and raised his head. He snapped his fingers with his left hand, and a strange fluctuation suddenly spread throughout the small palace. Yi Shi, Ziyi, and the others trembled slightly. The moment the energy fluctuation spread, the lightning that had condensed in Ding Mingyu's hand disappeared with a poof. She was startled, and her mind moved slightly. She wanted to summon the lightning again, but no matter how hard she concentrated, she could not summon a single strand of lightning. Even her demonic aura had been sealed. Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others, who were just about to move away, were stunned. Was it over just like that? Ding Mingyu stared blankly at her hand. After a long while, she sighed and raised her head to look at Yin Nuashing. She said with some hidden bitterness, "All right, you win." Yin Nuashing chuckled when he heard this. He snapped his fingers again, and the energy fluctuation dissipated. He explained faintly, "Combined with what I comprehended from the suppression formation, spirit barrier, I created a barrier region with me as the center. Within this region, no one will be able to use energy. However, this does not include myself. With my strength, I can make the barrier cover a radius of 1,000 miles. When a spirit barrier is activated, I will not be able to move. As long as one's spiritual strength is not stronger than mine, they will be affected by the barrier. Even if one's spiritual strength is stronger than mine, they will be weakened a little. The degree of weakening depends on the difference in spiritual strength between me and that person. The smaller the difference, the smaller the weakening." Yin Nuashing smiled. This was something he comprehended from a suppression formation when he learned the fire of the soul. In his opinion, it was not very useful. It was already good enough that it could be used to scare people. It was not as useful as the suppression formation. If he really wanted to compare, it was even more strange than the suppression formation. It used less energy. The suppression formation also needed to constantly use powerful energy to suppress the people trapped in the formation. It was fine if he was only controlling one person. However, if he was controlling many people stronger than him at the same time, he would not be able to maintain it without a strong foundation. However, the spirit barrier did not have such requirements. As long as the other party's spiritual strength was weaker than his, he could seal the other party's energy. The consumption of spiritual strength required to maintain the barrier was not very high. Generally speaking, each had its own merits. However, he felt that it was not very useful. When Ding Mingyu and the others heard this, their expressions changed slightly. Inside the barrier, apart from the person using the barrier, no one else could use energy. Although the person using the barrier could not move, the others did not have any energy and could only use their physical strength to resist. As long as they did not cultivate the physical body, they would basically have their arms cut off if they were trapped in the barrier. I'm researching how to make the person I choose use energy in the barrier. Yin Nuoxing rested his chin on his hand and thought for a while. When he saw Yi Shi swinging her feet at the side, her wine-red eyes flickered with a strange light as she looked at him. He immediately smiled and said, "Little Shi, come and help." Hearing this, Yi Shi smiled knowingly and nodded slightly. "Then let's adjust tonight and leave tomorrow." Ding Mingyu glanced at him and said with a faint smile on her red lips. Yin Nuoxing also smiled and nodded. Then his expression changed slightly, and he said with an evil grin, "I have a bold idea. Everyone, please put away your bold idea." Chapter 728. When a strand of light tore apart the darkness of the night and scattered across the land, the enormous Far Light Academy once again became lively. Countless pairs of eyes opened in every corner of the academy, and the anger and battle intent that had been suppressed for an entire night soared into the sky once again. Today was the second day of the Divine Institute exchange, and it was still extraordinarily lively. The dazzling sparks and fierce battle intent woke up the students who were cultivating in the academy. Instantly, even more people opened their eyes, and with a loud roar, they joined the enormous battle. In the battle, dozens of people wearing different academy uniforms were fighting in a chaotic manner, and there was practically no distinction between friend and foe. Dozens of energy attacks were sent flying in all directions. Moreover, it wasn't just the students of the Far Light Academy who were fighting with the students of other academies. Even the students of other academies were fighting with each other. The way they fought made it seem as if they were enraged when they saw their enemies. In the central square of the Far Light Academy, there was a group of figures arranged in the sky above the several 100,000 teleportation gates. If one were to count carefully, one would see that there were 100 figures. Below those figures were energy screens, and the images on those screens were the locations of those figures. Above those figures were rows of words that clearly indicated their strength, the power they were proficient in, and the location they were at. At the very top was a string of numbers, and every time a person on the screen defeated another person, the number would increase, as if it was recording the number of people defeated. Wow, that's too much. So this is what it means to show them. It's like a public execution. Won't people be paying attention to this no matter where they go? In the sky above a certain red academy, a young man in platinum robes waved the silver spear in his hand, and he couldn't help but smack his lips as he looked at the 100 figures. From 80 to above, all of them are demigods. TSK, what's wrong with this year? So many demigods have appeared. A young man who was also wearing a platinum robe crossed his arms and looked at the ranking. He couldn't help but click his tongue. Then, he looked at the bottom of the ranking, and some black lines appeared on his forehead. He couldn't help but mutter, "Defeating someone of the same level will add 1 point to your score. Defeating someone of a lower level will only add 0. 1 point to your score. Defeating someone of a higher level will add 1 point to your score. Defeating someone of a higher level will add 10 points to your score." Haha, I think it's quite fun. Look at the two of us, 60 and 55 points respectively. We're currently ranked 85 and 90. If we work hard, we might be able to squeeze into the top 80. Shui Lingfeng laughed as he brandished his silver spear. Zhao Wenyao was speechless when he heard his fearless words. Why don't we find someone in the top 50 to play with? Oh, there's one right here. She's 25. She's a girl. Go and flirt with her. Shui Lingfeng grinned strangely as he stared at the image that was ranked 25th. Idiot. Pervert. IF asterisk King misjudged you. Zhao Wenyao's face was cold. He gritted his teeth and said angrily, that guy is a demigod rank 3rd rank. Do you want us, 2 peak demigods, to fight to the death? Anyway, we've already killed a god's son. Those rank 25th shouldn't be so weak. They should be able to withstand my all-out attack. After laughing out loud, Shui Lingfeng licked his lips and said something that made Zhao Wenyao shudder. After saying that, Shui Lingfeng raised his head and looked at the sky. He sighed and muttered, Junior brother, you're so slow. Is he not here yet? Hearing Shui Lingfeng mention that person, Zhao Wenyao's expression became a little strange. What happened a month ago on the Battle King stage scared him half to death. Even someone as strong as Shi Yuan was beaten to a state worse than death. That scene would probably be forever imprinted in the hearts of the students of the Far Light Academy. Whether it was the freshmen or the seniors, they were all, at this moment, in the freshman area of the Far Light Academy, in the small palace beside the lake. Yin Nuoxing looked at the mirror and tidied up the platinum clothes on his body. The golden patterns and the faintly discernible golden shrine behind his back, together with the young man's tall body, made him look inexplicably dignified. However, if one raised their head to look at his delicate face, they would find that it didn't match. So ugly. It's not suitable. Yin Nuoxing frowned. He waved his hand and took off his platinum clothes. He put on the black clothes and windbreaker. The windbreaker was opened casually, revealing a sense of free and easy handsomeness. A wicked smile hung on his delicate face, making him look even more elegant. Little star, we're representing the Far Light Academy. Didn't Elder Yin Feng say that we have to wear the academy uniform? 2 slender arms suddenly stretched out from behind him and rested on Yin Nuoxing's shoulders. He was stunned and couldn't help but turn his head. The one who appeared behind him was naturally Xian. At this moment, the young girl had changed from her gorgeous purple clothes to the Platinum Academy uniform. The uniform was extremely slim, and it wrapped around the young girl's slender and graceful figure, perfectly showing off her alluring curves. Her curvaceous body, her proud bosom, her small waist, and her straight and slender legs were enough to make countless men's mouths dry up. Her soft, dark purple hair that was usually casually draped over her shoulders like silk was now slightly gathered and tied with a purple hairband around her waist. The rest of her hair hung down to her thighs. Looking at this stunning young girl, Yin Nuoxing sighed. He didn't even have time to look at her. Xian had already grabbed his windbreaker and black clothes without any hesitation and took them off. Yin Nuoxing felt an inexplicable chill on his body and shivered. He lowered his head and saw that his upper body was naked. He then saw that Xian had casually thrown his black windbreaker on the bed. He was a bit speechless as he looked at her and Feng Er, who was standing at the door and covering her eyes with her jade-like hands. In the end, her fingers were wide open and her face was bright red. He couldn't help but say, I say, shouldn't you guys at least look away? Haven't you seen enough along the way? Xian's words almost made Yin Nuoxing spit out a mouthful of blood. You're so valiant that I don't know what to say. After saying that, Xian also helped Yin Nuoxing put on the white gold uniform with great difficulty and gently helped him tidy it up. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to mutter that the uniform was so ugly, Xian chuckled and took out a snow-white cloak. He gently draped it over Yin Nuoxing's back and said softly with a smile, Now you don't think it's ugly, right? No, I mean the uniform and I are parallel. Feng Er, Bing Er, what are you guys doing? Before Yin Nuoxing could finish speaking, he turned around and saw Feng Er walking in with little Bing Er. Both of them were wearing white gold dresses and stood beside Xian. Mei Mao looked at him with a smile, as if she was waiting for something. Daddy, do I look good? Bing Er lifted the hem of her dress and twirled it around, forcing a faint smile on her cold face. Her 2-meter-long blue-gold hair was tied up with 2 blue-gold butterfly knots that reached her neck and knees. Her youthful, lively, and cute appearance made Yun Nuoxing feel a little helpless. This girl was even taller than him, Xian, and Feng Air when she stood up. She was even wearing high-heeled boots and was half a head taller than him. You do look good, full marks. You're the clothes hanger. Yun Nuoxing seriously looked at the 3 beautiful flowers together and reached out to rub their heads. Then, he was stunned and looked at Feng Air and Little Bing Air strangely. He was speechless and said, "So you two, what are you doing?" "Playing," Feng Air and Little Bing Air replied together. "Do you want to tear down the academy?" Yun Nuoxing's face fiercely twitched a few times. He knew that Feng Air's destructive power was definitely not inferior to his. Moreover, she and Little Bing Air were genuine god-level experts. If he allowed them to participate in this Divine Institute exchange, it would be like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, just as he was about to open his mouth to persuade them. Yun Nuoxing saw the limpid eyes of the 3 girls that were filled with anticipation as they looked at him. Their lovable appearance caused him to be at a loss for words for a moment. He opened his mouth, but 2 minutes later, he directly gave up on persuading them. He slapped himself, turned around, and walked out of the room in a bad mood. Xian and the other 2 girls cheered and clapped their hands when they saw this. Then, they eagerly followed behind Yun Nuoxing. They looked so excited that it was as if they were the students representing the Long Light Academy. Yun Nuoxing secretly glanced at the 3 girls who were excitedly following behind him. He smiled bitterly. The 3 girls were a drama, and he couldn't afford to offend them. When they went down to the hall, Zi, Lan Xen and Kai Xia greeted Yun Nuoxing. They weren't in a hurry to return to his soul, and they drank tea unhurriedly. Yun Nuoxing also played with Yishi for a while before he led Xian and the other 2 girls out of the palace. In the central plaza of the Long Light Academy, there were more than 100,000 teleportation screens circulating with spatial fluctuations. Figures fighting could already be seen 3,000 meters away from here. The number of people fighting was uneven, and it ranged from 1 against 1, 2 against 2, all the way to 7 against 7. There was even a huge circle where a dozen people were surrounding a single person. At the bottom of the plaza, there was an empty space where a few young boys and girls were gathered. They were sitting on a big rock and seemed to be resting. Those who passed by the big rock couldn't help but glance down. Then, they looked away with lingering fear and hurriedly ran away from this place. It was as if those young boys and girls were some kind of ferocious beasts. When Yun Nuoxing and the other 3 appeared, they also saw the few young boys and girls who were already waiting here. They had also changed into the academy's uniform. The boys were handsome and the girls were pretty. Their posture was tall and straight, and their appearance was stunning. These people clustered together unknowingly formed a beautiful scenery. You guys are? The few people in front of him were naturally Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others. However, Yun Nuoxing was a little surprised because their robes were slightly messy and the corners were even a little damaged. About that. I woke up early in the morning and warmed up while waiting for you guys. Lin Sheng grinned and then took out the Long Light Academy's token. At this moment, the back of the token no longer displayed the energy value, but the battle score. On his token, there was clearly a large number of 20. For cross-level battles, the higher the score, the higher the score. On the other hand, the lower the score, the lower the score. Ding Mingyu also took out her token. On the other hand, there's also a number on the token, but it was only 1 point. You wiped out a small team, right? Yun Nuoxing looked at Lin Sheng speechlessly. This guy was a half-demon rank 8 transformation. It seemed that he was also a tough guy. He had warmed up to 20 points. Everyone glanced at Bing Air, who was standing quietly behind Yun Nuoxing without saying a word. They were all stunned and thought for a while. They felt that they had seen her somewhere before, but they couldn't remember where. However, they didn't ask anything. They just looked at Yun Nuoxing with a strange gaze. This guy had a lot of women around him. All of them were extremely beautiful and had their own merits. Could it be that he was popular with women just because he had a girl's face? Yin Nuoxing naturally didn't know what they were thinking and didn't care. He looked at the chaotic battle in the sky, and then at the 100 figures standing beside the teleportation gate. When he saw the 70th person, he couldn't help but laugh and say, Shui Lingfeng and the rest are working hard. We can't fall behind. Let's split up and form our own teams. It's not easy to do things when we're together. Yin Nuoxing smiled. I thought about it just now. It's indeed better to split up. Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the rest nodded. They obviously knew about this problem. The destination was different because of personal factors. It was not a good thing to group up at this time. Seeing that everyone nodded, Yin Nuoxing smiled and said, That's it then. Oh, right, you guys better not meet me. I'm planning to push my way through. If you're accidentally hurt, then I'll see you on the sickbed. Mr. Yin, can you not say such scary things? Jun Luo Yi's delicate body trembled slightly when she heard that. She subconsciously hugged her chest and looked at Yin Nuoxing in shock. Yin Nuoxing laughed loudly. Then he snapped his fingers, and energy talismans flew out from between his eyebrows and floated in front of everyone. He smiled and said, This is my sponsorship. Do your best. Okay. Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu, Lin Sheng, and the rest responded. Then, they looked at each other and smiled. Their bodies flashed, and they rushed out in 2s and 3s. Chuan Mu was still in a group of 3, Ding Mingyu was still with Jun Luo Yi, and Lin Sheng was also with Yi Qinglian. They all flew towards different teleportation screens. Yin Nuoxing grinned and waved his hand. He led Xian and the other 2 girls to a screen at the bottom. As the screen squirmed, the scene in front of them changed slightly. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.